Me. Roll call. I do that every time. Roll call. I guess Nathan, can you do the roll call, please?
My pleasure. Elizabeth Barrett. Pip Clues. Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Ann Walker.
Here.
Margot Peabody.
Here.
Nancy Clayburgh.
Here.
Hope Van Epps.
Here.
Brian French.
Here.
Carrie Nolte. Danielle Miles.
Here.
Nathan Delaney.
Here.
Welcome all.
See how it goes.
Yes. All right, can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And here comes Pip. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
Add Pip to the roll call.
Yes. Thank you. Welcome. Okay. We have, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And wait,
Go ahead.
oh, okay. I was going to say we have 4 items on the consent agenda and would like to approve all 4 of those at once unless someone would like to pull something out and have a discussion on it, or if they have a question on it or whatever. So does anyone have a question with one of the consent agenda items and would like to pull it out, and we'll vote on that separately? Pip?
I do have a minor change for the minutes.
On the October 24th minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll hold those out. Okay, can we have a motion to approve B, C, and D?
Do we want to name what those are for the record?
Oh, okay, good idea. B is the New Hampshire School Boards Association continuing resolutions. C is approval of the memorandum of agreement for Association of Portsmouth Teachers, the APT. And D is approval of memorandum of agreement for the clerical employees, which is PACE.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Just a very quick clarifying question.
Yes.
Is this just for things that we need to approve or also for information items?
Both.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
You're welcome. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I guess we go back to the approval of the October 24th, 2023 minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Margot, do we have a second?
Second.
Hope. Okay. Any discussion? Yep.
Yes, I noted that there was one place where I believe I had voted against something in my, I believe the names of the people who voted were switched. I think it was Rule 30. My screen. And it was a 4-2 vote, I believe, and it was listed that the 2 who opposed were Ann Walker and Nancy Clayburgh, but I believe, Nancy, that you voted in favor of that, and I voted against it.
I think what I voted was to totally remove the consent agenda rule.
That's what you proposed, but then in the end, I think you voted yes.
Oh, I did?
No.
Okay.
I recall you voting still no.
You did? Okay. Well, I believe I voted no as well, so.
Okay. So you want us to add your name to the opposed?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, can we make that change, everyone? And I'm sure Paulette will make that change for us. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? No. Okay, great.
Nancy, may I interrupt?
Thank you, Pip.
Who seconded that?
I did.
But I
Oh,
think,
but I don't,
Hope bought
Oh,
Nan.
good, okay.
I don't know.
Gotcha.
I
7-0.
don't know who was called on, but I think
Thank you.
Ann and I both did.
Nathan, pay attention.
I'm sorry, catching up. All these new duties.
Okay, let's see. We are up to announcements and recognitions. I think Zach has some.
Yeah, so
I have some.
first, it's an announcement. This is the New Hampshire DOT is going to be doing a public information meeting on sound walls and privacy fence construction on I-95. Some of this affects the area around New Franklin School. I know there have been groups in the community who have been interested in this for a while. Also, I think people, if you pay attention to some of the discussion, the ability, the city's ability to do sound wall work independent of New Hampshire DOT is very limited. And when it comes to New Franklin, the distance back from the road it would need to be on city property would be, if you think about the high banks at New Franklin, it'd be way down the high bank. So I think we were at, Nathan and I were at a meeting the other night, and there was a description of, you would need like a 50-foot wall on the city property in order to accomplish the goal of actual sound restriction. So anyways, this meeting from New Hampshire DOT is on November 29th. It will be held here at City Hall. There's an open house from 5:30 to 6 o'clock, and then at 6 o'clock there's a presentation from New Hampshire DOT. This project is not limited to the area around New Franklin. This includes work that would include space near Panaway, Maplewood Ave. So there's a variety of different spots that are part of it. And if people have an interest and would like to be heard by New Hampshire DOT, again, this is not something the city can do on its own. So we encourage folks to turn out for that meeting.
November 29th, at what
November
time?
29th, here at City Hall, 5:30 to 6 o'clock is an open house prior to a question and answer presentation and question and answer session that starts at 6 p.m.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have a couple of things here. First of all, I want to give a big shout out to Hope Van Epps for her organization of the reception for our Italian students who are visiting. They're not here anymore now, are
No,
they?
they're not.
Okay. They were here for visiting from Italy. How do you say the name? It's Sant'Angelo, Italy. And I should pronounce it correctly, but we have students here, and now our students will go there. But Hope organized a lovely reception at the Museum of Art in Portsmouth, which is at the Jimmy's Jazz Club. It was awesome, Hope. There was so much spirit and excitement and love and friendship. It was really, really, really exciting. Thank you for doing that. I know that you pulled it all together, so.
Well, that's
that
very
was-
kind. It was definitely a group effort amongst Principal Chinosi and Joseph Marquette, and a huge shout out to Massimo and his support in that, and also our mayor and our city manager. And so I think it was one of the rarities where we got to see a lot of our officials come together under one roof, and we got to see the benefit of what happens when community all comes together for one good cause. So all I can say is I encourage that to keep happening.
Yes, yes, good point, a really good point. Well, thank you so much. You really worked hard on that.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. I also
Sure.
want to talk for a minute about a graduate. Max Esposito is his name. He graduated in probably 2012, and he is the head trainer for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And you all know that they were just in the World Series. So I would see him on the field every once in a while. A player would get injured and you'd see him run out on the field. So we're very proud of Max. He went to Northeastern, got his degree in physical therapy, and then he went on to get another advanced degree, which I guess Major League Baseball requires. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but that was really cool that he was in the World Series with the Arizona Diamondbacks. So that was a cool story. I want to let everybody know about the parade, the Christmas parade, which is December 2nd. How many people would like to march in the parade like we did at the Portsmouth 400? I'm marching. Anyway, I'll keep reminding you and sending out emails. It's pretty much the same route we had the last time, which goes from Pick and Pay, the Hannaford, all the way to all the way to the middle school is how it goes. It's cold. We've done it before. It's very cold. You have to dress for it. We have our banner, so we can all march behind the banner. What I would like to do is position ourselves in front of the high school band. They're always the last event, and they play the Christmas holiday songs. So, and you can bring your families. The kids love it. So if you're so inclined, I'll send out some reminders, but it's a lot of fun. Yes.
I just wanted to tag on to that and say, if you go to PHS's website for the music group, they're going to be caroling downtown during some of that time. So if anybody wants to hear tunes, and then there's also a ton of events happening in December at the high school. So I just encourage people to check out the website.
And don't forget the play this weekend. Oh, Lisa, go ahead. Why don't you talk about it?
No, it's okay.
Oh,
I have one other thing after the play, but mention the play.
okay. It's this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday
Thursday.
evening. Thursday. Okay, that's right. And
It's open tonight, yeah.
I know that there's a matinee on Saturday, so
Sunday.
I think that's the only day there's a matinee. And then Sunday, it's 2 p.m. They don't have it at night. And it's The Wedding Singer.
Yes.
That should be really cool.
The Wedding Singer.
Yeah, so try to go if you can. They always do a fabulous job, so I'm sure it will be great. And I want to congratulate 3 new board members who will be joining us in January. Byron, welcome. He's here with us tonight. And then we also have Tish Campbell and Lee Hudson. So we will be having orientation. Margot has helped put together, I have it right here, Margot, I printed it out, a schedule for an orientation, and I guess we'll do that in December, correct? Okay, so we'll have to schedule a time in December. You're all invited to come to it. We'll let you all know when it's going to be. It's kind of a nice refresher for all of us, who've been around for a while. So we'll have that. What were you going to say?
I was going to say we've got each of the folks coming in to meet with the central office team sometime soon, just to have a kind of casual sit down and introduce them to all of us, hear a little bit about what they're hoping to do, just so we can start to think about how we can best help. And then I think what we've been looking at is the first and second weeks in December, trying to use a doodle poll to figure out when folks are going to be most available. And then we're thinking about multiple dates, not just a one-off, having multiple sessions with folks. We think there's enough to do, and I think in listening to folks who have been on the board before and what your experience or lack of experience was in having orientation proper, we're going to try to bolster that a little bit so folks are in a, feel a little bit better as they sit up here for the first time.
Okay, thank you, Zach. And does somebody have something? Oh, Lisa.
So, speaking of elections, I just want to take a moment to thank all of the people in our community who donated to all of the Election Day bake sales. It was a lot of families that contributed, a huge number of local businesses that donated a substantial amount of stuff. A lot of voters came out and really supported it. All of that money goes to enrichment and a lot of great things for the teachers and kids. And I also want to give a shout out to our Seacoast Students for Sustainability and the PHS Eco Club, who took the initiative to be out at some of the polling sites advocating for what they felt were really important climate-related issues. I love seeing our students really using their civics knowledge to advocate in a real way in the community. So that's all.
And Pip, I should have congratulated you for being reelected. I just mentioned the new people. I didn't mention Pip. Right, Pip.
Welcome back.
Thank you for being with us for another term.
Yes, I'm very glad to be.
Okay, the only other thing I wanted to say was everyone has a copy of the new rules and regulations. I guess it probably would be a good idea to bring these to every meeting if we.
We were talking about the possibility of maybe at the end of the night we'll take them back,
take them
or at
back.
least the laminated motion
Okay.
guide, because we just have that one set and they were nicely done externally, and so we're thinking we'll take them with your name tags at the end of the night.
Okay.
I had one other quick recognition really quick, and it's just I just wanted Nathan Delaney. So Nathan recently participated in a training held by the New Hampshire School Boards Association and their executive director for regional student reps. And I was in a great position where I wasn't able to join for that webinar, but that I was at a regional superintendent's meeting, and then I had Barrett Christina, who's the executive director of the School Boards Association, talk about the training, and then specifically talk about Nathan and how impressive he was. And in front of a room full of regional superintendents. So it was one of the, as I had sent something to Nathan, it made Portsmouth look good, and well done. And I know the School Boards Association is looking to do more training this year, some statewide stuff as well. And so I know he's a busy man, but hopefully we can get Nathan to go to some of that stuff as well.
Well done, Nathan.
Good job, Nathan.
Good job.
And Nathan, the soccer team made it to the semifinals, correct?
No, we didn't. I wish we did. We made it to the first round of the playoffs, and we faced Bedford. It didn't go the way we wanted it to. We lost, but it was a great season. It was a great season, but we look forward to the next. Yeah.
And we have a football coming up Friday, that's Friday night, correct, for the semifinals?
Yes.
Okay, is that, it's not at Portsmouth? is
Also
it?
against Bedford. Yeah, so-
Always
It's at home.
Santa.
Yeah.
It's at home.
It's at home,
It's at
okay,
home.
good, all right, okay, so if anybody can go to that, that will be exciting.
Payback for soccer.
Do you know the theme? What's the theme for Friday night?
I don't know it yet. I think that we'll know probably by Wednesday.
top
So,
secret
yeah, Wednesday.
till-
Yeah. Can't let us know too soon.
That's right.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. We have a lot going on, that's exciting for our school district. Public comment, do we have anyone here that would like to speak on public comment? Matt, do we have anyone on Zoom?
We do not have anyone on Zoom.
Okay, then we can close the public comment session. And now, we would like to move up an item on the agenda, correct?
Yeah, I think when we created rules, we talked about the fact that Rule 7 gives you the opportunity to, Rule 7 spells out the order, the typical order of items, but you also have the ability to suspend rules in order to move up particular presentations. Tonight, we have two participants from the Portrait of a Graduate Working Group with us. Leah Tuckman, who's been our guide through this process from Great Schools Partnership, and Joanna Kelly, who was recently re-elected assistant mayor here at the great city of Portsmouth. So with them both here, it would be great if folks would be willing to suspend the rules and move up their presentation, and then consideration of the final draft from that group of the Portrait of a Graduate.
Okay, do we have a motion to suspend the rules and move up item 8A to right now?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Great.
you're on.
So, yeah, you guys want to come on up and we'll get you going.
I did.
Good evening, everyone. I haven't been on this side in a couple of years. Thank you so much for having us. First, I want to say Joanna Kelly, Assistant Mayor, Simmons Road. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to give my full address. I want to thank you so much, Superintendent and Leah and the whole committee that I have been part of for the last, almost a year. It's been really great for me to meet so many active people within our school department, different principals, teachers, and I think that this is such an exciting project and undertaking that we are doing in our school systems. And I just want to say thank you so much for including me in that.
Thank you, Joe. Can everyone hear me? A little vertically challenged. I might have to move this.
You're good.
I'm going to breeze through the first set of slides because it might seem like review for you and get to the good part, which is sort of where we've landed. So I am going to honor sort of the path that we took, and then I'll turn it over to Joe, who's going to guide us through the 6 pillars that we landed on. So just want to remind you that this all started almost a year ago now with a giant community survey that went out. School focus groups at every school with teachers and with students, small focus groups, community forums, committee meetings, which we were lucky enough to have Joe join us for, and then a survey that just went out, actually I should say just closed. It was open for a long time. We really wanted to make sure we got everybody, at back to school nights, get students' voices heard. So today I'm going to be focusing on that second survey, what it told us, and then I'll hand it over to Joe. So again, just some recaps of the focus groups that took place, the community forums that took place, some of our committee meetings that took place, and the good work we did to sort of aggregate the data, make sense of the data, before we got to this second survey, which I'll be presenting to you today. So this second survey had a total of 838 responses. Of those responses, we had about 67% were students, about 22% were parents or caregivers, about 9% teachers, almost 5% community members, and then 4.3% other staff. Also worth noting that in general, the pillars, those 6 pillars that I presented to you a few months ago, were rather well received. So at an aggregate level, 80 to 90% of participants said that that these mostly or fully reflected their vision for a graduate. You can see on an average score of 1 to 4 where each of those 6 pillars lie. But to be clear, again, 80 to 90% said that this either mostly or fully reflected their vision. One thing we did also want to make a note of is, how it broke down each of these 6 pillars. And then finally, based on all of the data we received, what were the changes that we made? So to be clear, knowledge was something, content knowledge was something that people felt were missing. This was something that we added. In addition, leaders. There were a few people in the survey results that said, we want our students to be leaders, and that's not mentioned anywhere. This was a word we added, as well as advocating. We wanted to make sure students could advocate for themselves, for others, and it was not included in the original results that we gave to you. Adaptability, another item that came up quite a bit. So we ended up adding that to the transferable skills pillar. And then finally, this ability to sort of have a strong sense of self-belonging and actualizing of one's goals. So these were the major pieces that were added since the last time I saw you. And I'm going to turn it over to Joe to sort of read where we landed in the wording of those 6 pillars. So she's going to go through each of them one at a time.
Thank you so much, Leah. As we all know, the wording of these pillars is so important, and the committee has taken a long time and really worked hard to figure out what we felt like based on the feedback, based on the surveys, that we could use to represent them. So the first one, as you see, is passion for knowledge. Our learners are intrinsically motivated and well prepared to chart their own paths using curiosity, creativity, knowledge, and critical thinking. Global awareness and community contribution. Our leaders are service-oriented leaders, our learners, in their own communities who are able to see beyond their own shores. They have a deep appreciation for other cultures, as well as a desire to establish themselves as advocates and contributors in the global landscape. As was mentioned earlier, obviously we had foreign exchange students from our sister cities, and watching the blending of those 2 students and the discussions between myself and them, and then adding in our Portsmouth students, was really something that was amazing for them to just openly discuss the differences, but also relish in the similarities that they had. So making sure that, when our students, walk across that stage, they have this desire to know more than beyond our community. Collaboration and communication. Our learners exhibit strong communication and collaboration skills that enable them to amplify diverse perspectives and skillfully navigate complex challenges. I think for me, it was very important when we were discussing this to remind all of us that when these students graduate, they're adults. They're still younger adults, but they're adults, and we need to make sure that we are lining them up for success in some of the more complex situations that they'll be navigating themselves into whether they go to secondary education or into the workforce, into the military, whatever desires they have, they're going to be facing complexities that we need to make sure that they're ready for. Transferable skills. Our learners possess practical life skills and strong work habits, enabling them to adapt and to thrive as independent adults. Of course, that touches on what I just talked about, that these are going to be adults. And it is our job to make sure that pre-K to high school, that they are building upon a set of skills that they can take anywhere. I think that we're seeing so much now, secondary education looks different than what has been so commonplace of a 4-year traditional degree. So we want our students to have a skill set that can go in and out of so many different avenues. personal well-being. Our learners are healthy individuals who find joy through a strong sense of self, belonging, and an ability to actualize their own goals, utilize resilience, flexibility, and a growth mindset. One of the big things when we were talking and trying to figure out the pillars was making sure that we represented mental health, making sure that we are teaching our students how to take care of themselves while they're also taking care of each other and while they're planning long-term strategies for their lives. Empathy and kindness. Our learners embody kindness, empathy, compassion, inclusion of all individuals. I think that, the mayor would give me a high five right now. I have to say, we are the city of the open door, and we really want our students to take that with them in every path that they choose in life. And for me, kindness is something that you learned so heavily in school. You learn to be respectful. You learn to care about your classmates, care about your teachers, your teammates. And so, again, to me, this was very high up on the pillar. And those are our goals. So I would just like to say, again, as somebody who did not think I would be part of this committee or up here today or spending the last year really diving into our school system, as someone who's not a parent, it was so clear to me how much the educators that are on this committee and the students who took part in the committee care about the longevity of what's going to happen in our school department. I also have to mention that when we look at the survey results, that we've had over almost around 1,000 people participate in all these surveys. That's almost unheard of. A good example is we use flash vote at City Council, and we are happy if we get 500 people. We can use that as a good soundbite of sample data. So to get almost 1,000 and to have all of these working groups, and to touch on a lot of different communities in every single one of our schools, and then outside in Wamasat and in some of the other neighborhoods that, education is really pillar to freedom in some of these circumstances. I really hope that comes across to this board of how much dedication was put into this portrait, and I hope that you vote to approve it so that it can then be actualized into what we're doing for our students.
Thank you, Joanne.
Yeah.
And thank you, Leah.
So just in terms of process, a couple of things. Our hope is that we're able to finalize a portrait this evening. And then in terms of kind of where we're going next, if you'll recall, a lot of this work was built around, the initial survey we sent out was 4 questions. And in the first 2, the things that we're talking about tonight were really built around the first 2 questions, which is like hopes and dreams for people. What skills or experiences do you want people to have when they walk across the stage? So as we move into the next phase, the kind of operationalizing phase of things, the first step for us is going to be going back to look at questions 3 and 4, which the short version of is basically like what is Portsmouth School Department already doing well? What are strengths that we want to hang on to? And the second one is what are some things that we didn't phrase it this way, but it's effectively what could we be doing better? Type questions. And then we're going to use some analysis of those questions, going back to that original set of surveys, as the launching point for building those operational steps. So.
And to just reiterate, this is just the beginning. So this is not where our work ends. This next phase is going to be creating a strategic plan, as Zach mentioned, analyzing additional data, as well as accountability data to help inform that strategic plan.
So true.
Okay, should we open it up to questions?
So,
Do board members have questions of Leah and Joanne?
More Leah than Joanna.
I think Margot's hand was
Margot.
up first.
Can you clarify where we landed on pillars versus mission and vision? It seems, as a longtime educator, this reads to me like where we hope to be, not where we currently are. So maybe it's a semantic thing, but I go back to the same feedback I had earlier. I have a hard time. How would you make these measurable, attainable, goals, intrinsically motivated. That's a hard thing to measure. It's lofty, and it's something that we would, of course, aspire towards. Service-oriented, we are not a service-required school district. So I'm curious, perhaps it's just I'm struggling in the way it's presented, but if you could guide me in that would be helpful.
That's a great question. And Zach and I actually had a long conversation about this, and we brought in some of my supervisors from Great Schools Partnership to help really think about what this is. Is this a mission and vision? And the answer is no. That's work we still have yet to do. I would say that these are like core values that we have here in Portsmouth. And so this would not replace mission and vision. This would not replace a strategic plan, which is very measurable. That's the whole point of a strategic plan, is to be able to measure it and progress monitor it as we go. So to your question, I would say these are core values, which can be a lot harder to measure.
I think we did talk about again, it goes back to North Star and these being the North Star. But what's important is in 3 years, every single student is not going to intrinsically value a certain thing. Or in 3 years, every student is not going to be service oriented, right? So, but I think what's having established like this is what we want to move towards. In this operational step, what will become important is how are we, in 3 to 4 years, how are we moving the needle in the direction of those things? What are those action steps we're going to take? And then to your point, which is super important, as we're doing that work, how are we going to know whether or not the needle was moved, right? And establishing on the front end of that conversation what those metrics are. And they won't be perfect metrics. It will be, here is a thing or two things we can use to see if there's been movement. So I think that's always going to be frustrating. There's not going to be the perfect kind of, data point, but having one or more data points around any initiative that shows whether or not we're moving in a successful way, and hopefully having that data point set up in a way where we're able to, as we move, we're a year and a half in, we should be able to know, are we making movement? Or are the strategies we put into place not as successful as we thought they were going to be? And maybe things that maybe we've gone far enough with them that it's time to drop, and admit that they haven't worked. Hopefully it's accelerating faster than we thought it would be, right?
Right.
So I think that idea becomes really important. I think what a lot of places, a mistake a lot of places make is they don't define the measures of levels of success at the beginning.
Right.
And then halfway through the process, you start trying to you're moving the goalposts to try to come to find data that fits your own kind of heartfelt feeling about what's happening with a particular initiative. So this next part, I think that's going to be really important as part of building those operational steps, being able to point to something that would tell us whether or not they're being successful.
Yeah, because thank you. That's my anxiety, is that if it's not clearly defined in a measurable way, we can just keep patting ourselves on the back and applying to great language, but it's about action steps. So am I correct in understanding that the portrait of a graduate is going to ground, it is the scaffolding of the strategic plan, or am I, because it's hard, it's.
So I understand. I think it is a cousin. I would say something a little bit different than Leah. I think it's a cousin of core values, but I think it establishes the North Star.
Okay.
Right. This is what we're pointing towards, and then what steps can we reasonably take to move the needle towards those things over this next 3 to 4 year period.
Okay. Thank you.
Hope.
So I have lots of things. So I don't want to dominate. You can come back to me again if you would,
No,
but I would
please,
like
go
to
ahead.
cover them before I vote, or I will have to probably abstain. So I'll start with the really easy stuff. First, thank you both to your work. And Joe, I can remember when you were coming in for your first election, and you and I were both doing that, and we had this long conversation about joining together for student work. So I am just so excited that you finally got to the table for that opportunity. for the feedback on students, was that grades middle school through high school? Was it also elementary, or it was middle school through high school?
Middle school through high
Okay,
school.
thank
Yep.
you. And
And
so,
just to reiterate, we haven't had a lot of luck with elementary students and surveys.
yeah.
So
Well,
we did
I can
focus
understand
groups
that's why.
with elementary students, but
right.
we did avoid surveys with the elementary
Yeah,
students.
that makes sense. And then, so I have some questions around some of the language choices that we're kind of focused on, but I guess one of my first questions is around the personal well-being. I'm very glad that this made it in the mix, and I think it's extremely important. I also find it concerning that it had to be added in the mix, and I kind of would like to understand, maybe it's a question for you, Zach, because I know before you have said that, hey, when I've asked some things, you're like, yeah, there will be some things maybe from the board or superintendent that will be driven that didn't shake out in community feedback. But I just look at the total language of it around the context of our learners are healthy individuals who find joy through a strong sense of self, belonging, and ability to actualize their own goals, utilizing resilience, flexibility, and a growth mindset. And the way that I understood, you said what's highlighted is what was added. So if through a strong sense of self, belonging, and ability to actualize their own goals was added, I guess my concern is that our students, 67% of our students didn't even see that they have a strong sense of self or belonging in the district. And I think that keeps coming up in this district around belonging. And so I guess back to Margot's point of like, if these are pillars, we're not there today. We're going to be moving towards that. But I'd like to understand how this was added. Like, who decided this does get in, and the need for that, and if only 9% of our faculty weighed in, that concerns me for buy-in around this particular topic, let alone a lot of other things. So I just want to make sure that, you know, as we're thinking about implementation and measurement of things, you know, you have to have buy-in for the pillars before you can really drive the implementation. So how did this
So we take them in
land?
chunks. So the first part, if I remember right, so originally all that was in here was around belonging. And then in the second round of surveys, one of the things that people pointed out, there were multiple people who said, well, it's not just about you belonging to a group, it's also about how this sense of well-being is also how you feel about yourself. So so within the round two, that was something that came up repeatedly. So then we reworked to get that other concept in there. And that really, that second round of that wordsmithing was pretty much Leah and I primarily on that last piece, based on what we got out of the survey too.
So when you're saying this highlighted stuff was added, changes made, it's changes made from the previous,
From the
not
original draft.
from, oh, we didn't see this bubble up, but it's still important to us, so we're going to add it.
I think, so.
No, it's from
go ahead.
the second survey.
From the second
Okay.
survey.
Yep, from the second survey.
And so we had,
Okay.
so we took that aggregate stuff. In terms of I did just want to say, I think the 9% on the faculty is not 9% of our total faculty. 9% of the sample were people who identified as faculty. So it might, that number might be a little bit higher, a little bit lower. It's probably a higher percentage of our faculty than 9%. But the sample is, the overall sample of 838, 9% of that sample was faculty or teacher.
Has there been work done in discussion with our faculty within this year besides within committees or such, just so they kind of know how they need to play along? Or is it
Well,
kind
not
of
much. I mean,
going to be like, here, now we're going to have a strategic plan and we need you to buy in where we've landed?
So my opening day kind of thing to the district, did some transitional work about, hey, welcome back type stuff. But then the second half of my stuff was about this. Here's what we're doing. Just to remind, you've heard me talking about it in videos and stuff and all this, but here's where we're at. Here's the version we've got so far, and we had the rough version from the summer. Here's what we're doing right now, which is the second survey. Here's what's going to happen after that. If you have an interest in participating in kind of some of the action step development, let me know. If some of these areas are areas you're particularly interested, let me know. So I got some people at that time who identified, and actually I had 2 people out of the blue today send me stuff. I don't even know if they knew we were giving this presentation, who were like, I really would like to be part of the action step process if you don't have that filled yet. So there was an awareness, but the timeline I gave faculty at the open was sooner than now, because we were going to close, I think we were going to close the first week of September or whatever was when we were initially going to close Survey 2. And then when we had the conversation here, there was a desire to move that date out beyond the last open house. So we're a little bit, so there could be some faculty who are kind of like, where are we at right now? And that might be where I'm getting some of the stuff. But yes, that was the primary portion of the substantive piece of my introduction, my reintroduction or my welcome back to all faculty was around this.
Okay, that's super
I have
helpful to understand.
3 additional points to make just in response.
Sure.
The first one is it's actually technically more like 13.5% of this total, because we would also include other staff.
Okay.
So when you think about someone who may not consider themselves a teacher, whether that's a paraprofessional, a nurse, an assistant principal, I mean, there are a lot of different things, obviously bus drivers, and we want to make sure that we hear from all different people involved in schools. So I would say it's more like 13.5% when you add the other staff with the teachers. One other thing that we did, as I mentioned, was we had focus groups last year with staff in every school with staff, and they were small focus groups. But we again reached out to principals and said, we don't want all teachers. We really want a mix of all the people doing all the roles in our buildings. And then the last piece is subcommittees. So once we establish our priority areas for our strategic plan, there are going to be subcommittees that sort of take on each of the 3 or 4 focus areas that are established. And I suspect and I hope that we'll be recruiting more educators to be on those subcommittees once we know what those focus areas are.
Okay.
So that'll be another opportunity for us to circle back.
Well, it's just super helpful to understand, too, that you can't have everyone sitting at the table. So I think it's just really important that it's circular throughout the process, right? That there's communication happening or that fingers out throughout the district. So yeah, I'll let other people go, and then can you come back to me? That's
Okay.
Thank you.
Danielle, and anyone else over here? Lisa, Pip? Okay.
I'm just curious, so much of this is looking at measuring success post-graduation. And I'm wondering if we haven't considered a more formal tracking system of our graduates to help us understand, because kids evolve at all different rates and stages. And so to really understand how our work is in the future, moving our population in a successful path, I'm wondering if that has come up as a topic.
Definitely. Some districts that have done this work have really thought about it by grade spans, or by grade bands, I should say. So what would this look like K to 5? What would this look like 6 to 8? What would this look like 9 to 12 and beyond? And that's certainly work that we can consider doing in the future, because you're right, this is, as Zach has mentioned, our North Star. So when kids graduate, this is what we're hoping they will have. But I have seen a lot of districts break it down as far as what it looks like at earlier grades.
And I'll just say the other, depending on what direction you want to go, the earlier grades and looking at data that would inform us about that, but also what happens post-graduation. And so, there's a tool that I know I've used. I've worked in districts where we try to do like guidance department exit surveys to students, but they were only so informative in terms of what was happening. And then the ability to track down alums after they go becomes really difficult for the school to get good information. So there's a tool out there called the National Student Clearinghouse, which is a consortium of most of the major post-secondary institutions in the country. And they actually, you have the ability through that service to track your graduates. And then you can see now this is all around post-secondary education, right? So you don't see students that, you don't have the ability to have similar data in terms of students who have gone directly into the workforce or into the military or in some other thing. But those who go into post-secondary, not every single kid, because we have Social Security numbers, you can get every single kid pretty much, but pretty close. You can watch the class and you can see what schools do they go to, how many drop out after the first year, how many have to take remedial courses, how many are going to 4-year schools, 2-year schools, privates, publics, how many end up being at school for 6 years. You have the ability to have a lot of that information, which is super informative because we do a lot of guesswork, I think, in most districts. And then our idea about what's happening with our students very often is driven by anecdotes. I heard so-and-so is doing wonderful and they're a trainer for the Diamondbacks. And I heard this other story that's a sad story, and then somehow people kind of put those things together and come to some amalgam of what they think is actually happening. What would be good for us is to, what's our ability to be regularly looking at post-graduation data to really tell us what's happening with students for real after they leave us. So, and that's not a super expensive service, and the work that goes in to set that up takes a little bit of time on the front end the first time you do it, but after that, it's usually not that bad.
Lisa.
Okay. Well, I guess, first of all, I really appreciate all the time that has gone into wordsmithing this, and I do feel like we are all, wed to certain language at the end of the day that may be slightly different, but I don't want to get stuck there. I think it's really important work, and I'm much more excited to see what the next steps are that play out from this, because I'm much more, where are we going to get into the deep dive of how does this translate into what types of things we are teaching people in the classrooms and how we're training our educators and all that stuff. So I don't want to get stuck too much on the language, but there's a few pieces that I'm still a little bit stuck on anyway. So I just want to voice them, but not necessarily say that means we shouldn't move this through. One thing I'm curious about is, we have long had these values around supporting equity in our schools, like raising respectful humans and supporting mental health. And I don't see this words here, and it concerns me. So I just feel like I need to put that out there into the world. I worry, I know what the intention is with saying, we want everybody to be healthy, but I'm always thinking a little bit about who are the kids who are not going to see themselves in these goals, or going to feel like it was everything I could do because of, physical health issues, mental health issues, just to be in the building, get through my day. And I don't want any student to see this and feel like there's no way this will ever be me. So I just feel like I want to voice that idea. I understand the intention, and there may not be a possible way to word it where every single kid is like, I can do this because everybody is different. But that just worries me a little bit. And I think about that a little bit in terms of the communication goal as well, where there's some kids that are just never going to be great communicators, or, maybe have other things that their strengths are just different than that, and they just can't hit this. And so again, I just think of that in terms of, are we holding up a standard as a district that there's no amount of educating that can get people to that goal? And then how does that make people feel who can't hit it? So I just want to put that out there. But I do also really overall like the direction of this, and I think we do need a compass to sort of lead us as we're thinking about what are the elements of the strategic plan and big picture. I like the buckets, but I just wanted to put those things out there. But I guess I wonder, you mentioned mental health when you were talking, and we've talked a lot about how we need to improve respect in our buildings, across the board. It's a problem you hear every day in various ways. But it's not here. So I just wondered, do you think it didn't come up in the surveys? Or was it more you were just trying to wordsmith it and at some point it's just too many words?
I'll just talk about during some of the committees is we really went back and forth of what words to use. I was actually more leaning on the side of not using words like leader, because I think that if we say that, we're saying to them they have to be the loudest voice, they have to be, but there's always helpers, there's different ways to lead. So I definitely think that I walked away from this being like, okay, it gets the message. But again, to me, this is the start point of the strategic plan where we'll dive more into those elements. It's the same that some people wondered if kindness was too broad of a word. You know what I mean? Or if it you know what I mean? So I agree with you. For me, I felt, and I think I speak for all of the committee, that the buckets felt good. And then, there are bigger definitions within these two. You know what I mean? So that's also the other part of it.
I would just say too, I don't think when I think about graduates who are coming across the stage and we have amazing kids, I don't think I think in any one graduate you could stop and they're not all, I think probably none of them are perfect on all of these pillars. None of them are going to achieve it. And I don't think our expectation is that, again, it's all about aspirational North Star type of stuff, because I don't think we had, when kids walked across and got their diplomas this time around, we have amazing students, but if you had a 10-point scale, I don't think there was any one kid who was 10 out of 10 on all these things. And that's not, because it's just, a lot of these are aspirational about what we hope to be as just humans, right? And I'm not a 10 out of 10 on all these things, and I haven't achieved all these things. So anyways, I would also throw that into that context. I think this is all aspirational for all of our folks.
Yeah, that's really fair, and I would support the buckets in general and sort of moving forward to the next steps in the process. I just wondered about those pieces.
Okay, we have Pip, Brian, and Hope again if nobody else raises a hand.
Yep. Let's see. I want to start by saying thank you to both of you for your time, and I'm going to reiterate my frustration with this process from a board point of view, because I feel that as the board that is intended to create the vision for our schools, we have not had nearly enough participation in this process that I would have expected. And so it's hard to have you guys coming to us and saying, please approve these, when we've barely had input. We've gotten the surveys and we've had a chance to respond, but I think what I'm hearing right now is a result of that, and the sense that we don't actually quite even understand what we're doing right now. But I'm really glad, Lisa, that you said what you did, because I think, and Zach, that you said that kids are not going to be able to achieve this. And that makes me feel really uncomfortable saying this is who our learners are, because we know they can't achieve it. So what are we doing? We're asking them to work to be something they can't be. I'm not comfortable with that. And so I think that a way around that, because I also agree that these are great buckets, I think that what I've heard, based on what I've heard, a way around this may be to change the language from our learners are to something like we value, because that is an aspirational expression, whereas we know our learners aren't all these things. So to say that doesn't feel genuine. So I hope that we can consider how we present them, and maybe, I think speaking of them as core values is a more appropriate way to think about them and a way to guide the next step. I have some more specific questions, but I think I would echo what Lisa said about health. I don't necessarily feel comfortable saying everybody is healthy, because a lot of people can achieve a lot of these things without being completely healthy, mentally or physically. And I would like to see the term mental health addressed in these somewhere. And then I also was curious how we came to the term learners as opposed to students. I mean, I don't know if that was covered here before, but could you guys address that? Or do you know where that came from?
We went back and forth a lot on students versus learners. I think the idea is we want to be inclusive of alumni as well. And sometimes you no longer carry the word, you no longer carry that identity as a student once you've graduated. And so we wanted it to be inclusive of alumni as well. But I really love your idea of, you know, if we're not, if we don't think even we can attain this, then starting with a different phrase, we value, would be a very easy change that would perhaps make it feel more like we don't have to attain all of these things. This is just, these are the things that we value. These are our core values.
Our students are striving
Yeah.
to hit these goals too. And I look at them as these are the things being poured into the bucket. You know what I mean? So not every student is going to hit 100% of their personal well-being or in a communication set or in a transferable skills. But if you take enough from each bucket, every student will walk away, you know, with their own personal full bucket. And so, you know, when I think for me, and I think I've mentioned it in some of the groups, you know, when we talk about pillars, I almost really wanted to see it more as like a totem. So every student is going to have different percentages of these goals. And I think when you think of it like that, then we're not asking every student to be 100% of a communicator, 100% of a leader. We're just saying to them, these are the buckets we're hoping to have for you to grab from. And again, using it to build deeper into their strategic plan, and then, you know, you guys in the leadership take it from there and help build upon that.
I think that's, I mean, using the term we strive or we value, I think is a much
I agree
more
with
appropriate way to express them. Thanks.
I mean, that's absolutely a change I'm open to making.
Okay, I think we have Brian, and then Hope, and then Lisa again, and Margot. Okay.
So I understood this differently, and I know that you guys are kind of focused on this, and I think I get that there's definitely the whole pillar thing. What does it mean is kind of being questioned here tonight. I do think, though, the way things are described, and maybe the wording, thank you, Pip, for saying that, the wording might be softer or more like, you know, not everybody's going to attain this, but when you operationalize this, that's when I feel like you're going to start using all the little pieces of it, because not every student's the same. They're all at different levels, and like looking at all those things is sort of your anchor to figure out what that looks like in order to bring X, Y, and Z to make this, you know, attain this thing that we're looking for. I'm happy with the buckets. Maybe the wording could be different, and but I think overall, if we look at through the lens of, because at the end of the day, we need a strategic plan, and we need to figure out how we're gonna, you know, hopefully have graduates that have some of these, you know, different buckets of stuff when they graduate. So I don't know if the wording of pillars is maybe not the right wording, or maybe it's just how we're presenting it, but we do have to come to a common ground, I think. Because I feel like we'll keep coming back to this. I've heard this before, actually, this conversation. So I'm hoping that we can come to a common ground and so we can present the one, you know, this is what we mean by this kind of thing. So thank you for
Brian.
your work, guys. It's a lot of work. Amazing.
Okay, I see, Ian, well, I saw Nathan and then Ian, and then we'll go back to those that already said something. Nathan?
Yes, so thank you guys so much for all the work that you've done with this. It's very impressive. I mean, when I joined in the summer, we were much farther behind than where we are now, so thank you very much. I'm just looking to clarify, so are these values what students should possess upon graduation, or are they values that they should strive to achieve by using the skills that they've learned through their journey in Portsmouth schools? I'm just trying to understand what we're going for here.
So from what I'm hearing tonight, that seems to be the general question, is like, should they be walking across the stage with this? For me, it's somewhat, yeah. But again, the goal is to give them, be able to fill their bucket from these buckets to keep going with it. It's to me, these pillars, or buckets or whatever term we want to use, are not, they don't end when you graduate. Again, that's just where I'm coming from when I, was part of this process, is that we're hoping that they have these skills to a certain degree, but again, I don't assume a student's going to have these skills and be filled on these 100%, but they're going to have enough to, as they graduate, they're going to feel comfortable, within this, identifying within this realm, that they'll be able to expand upon those. So again, I think that comes with changing some of the wording, to, our students are striving to become, you know what I mean, are continuing to learn, are committed to continuing to learn skills.
Okay, yes, thank you very much.
Zach?
So I was going to say that it's, it's good to go back to what is this born of? It's born of the basic conversation with the community and all the different stakeholders is, what do you want your schools to do? Right? What are we have this K-12, a pre-K-12 system. What do you want? What's the point of it for you? And what do you want it to do? And we're gonna try to come to a community consensus around that, around this metaphor of the graduate walking across the stage, and what is that? What do we hope that student is like when they walk across the stage? So it is aspirational. It is, but it is born of that question. What do you, community? What do you, stakeholders? What do you, students? What do you want this experience to be about? And more importantly, what do you want it to do for our community? So I think, I don't know, that's the best way to tether it. And a lot of people approach that when they think about it from different angles and perspectives.
Anne? Thank you, Zach.
I agree with quite a bit of what everybody has said in that that these are core values and these are our hopes. And to expect students to have 100% of each of these, we know that kids grow in leaps and bounds in all different areas. And I mean, it can happen in an instant. I mean, there's nothing more exciting than to see those lights go on and know if they've got it. And then try to explain to somebody, what have they got?
Yeah, right.
Well, they've got the beginning of it, and it's ongoing. So I just think a little wordsmithing, maybe. But great job, a lot of work.
Okay, I think Hope was next, and then Lisa. No, Margot, and then Lisa.
Danielle has her hand up too.
Okay, and Danielle, you can go after that. I'm on second round speakers now. Okay, Hope.
So thank you, Lisa and Pep, for bringing that up, and Joanne for adding Strive. It's all things I have down on my notes that I wanted to say earlier. I'm sitting here tonight, and I'll just be honest, this process has been really difficult for me as a board member. I was not on board with POG when we voted to have it for all of these reasons and more, even though I'm fairly happy with where we've landed in the pillars. I still am puzzled by our district being so equity focused for the last, 2 years that I've been on the board, and now it disturbs me that didn't come up much in language. That's to no fault of the committees or anyone doing work. I think it's saying something about where our society and our own town sits right now, and so that's something or maybe it's a shift and we're looking at equity in different ways and being able to plug that in many ways, but I certainly hope that we don't lose focus there. I do think our learners is just very restrictive language. I think it boxes people in. It does not even come close to shooting to making people feel like they belong. And I'm sorry if it's a harsh judgment, but it's, I would like to see Portsmouth learners. And I know that we have SAU 50 and other people feeding in, but we are a Portsmouth district, or we value, or something along that line to strive for. And I guess it just puzzles me that we've been working on this for a year, which with the consulting background, I felt was way too long to come up with these pillars. And yet we're still having discussions and having students ask, what do you expect to be from POG? The fact that we can't definitively answer that is mind-boggling to me. So I really feel like the committee and all parties need to regroup. It's whether you want to call them values or call them pillars, it doesn't matter what you call them if you do not have concrete legs to implement what you're putting in writing. So if we are going to say that we are service-oriented leaders or followers, because you need both in a society that is a successful community, then we need to be service-oriented in our board, in our policies, in our procedures, and what we expect for graduating. We don't even ask our students to give credits towards service orientation. The service-oriented things that they belong to is honor society and peer leadership. It's not because we as a district set that record. So that is where I'm really struggling. You're asking me to vote on something that I don't see has legs. And I understand how consulting works. I understand that the strategic plan is to come. But I see a lot of things in here that we don't currently value in how we actualize things in our district. And so that's where it gets gray for me, because I've heard, well, these things are happening and we're moving towards them. And these things are what we expect of our learners. But we don't need to be expecting them of our learners. We need to be expecting them of our district. They can't be our learners. It has to be our teachers, our board, our superintendent, which is why he's here, is because he did represent all these pillars. And so I guess that's where I'm struggling tonight. I desperately want to see some of the language taken away. I know it was jokingly said that students see beyond our shores. That's incredibly cliche. And it's great, it's seaside, it's Clipper, but it's incredibly cliche. And it's not truly authentic language. If we want them to see beyond Portsmouth, let's use authentic language that they can identify with. Let's not use marketing cliches, please. So, I mean, I think where we've landed is really great for pillars. I'd love for us to have a conversation as a board of how that's going to measure against board goals, because we seem to get very confused around what's pillars now, what's going to be board goals, well, what's going to be the strategic plan. And I just think there's needs to be more discussion. I agree with Brian of call it whatever you want to call it, but you need to understand how those things align and how you're going to execute. That's the meat of the language that needs to be taking place, in my opinion. So sorry for the the revival in discussion, but I'm just struggling with how to vote tonight.
Yeah, and Hope, I don't think there's apologies needed. I think that this is why you guys are elected, to be up here to have moments like that. As far as the language, I think there was a lot of back and forth. I mean, during one of the first work sessions, I would say there were easily 200-300 words up as we're trying to figure out, do we put global citizen? Well, then if we're saying global citizen, are we forgetting that you need to also be a home, you need to care about your home as much as you care about, another community? Or, when we talk about mental health, are we, mental health is different for everyone, as is healthy, it's different for everyone. So I think, as far as the committee, and I can totally 100% see your frustrations, and agree with a lot of them of figuring out kind of, it would have been nice for me as a committee member to know some of the board goals as we went into this, and to make sure that we're not overstepping or sidestepping something that's important as a district. But for me, I was looking for a broad brush for this, to know that, you know, this is going to be the start, and as you said, the start to the strategic plan. So within that, as that is being worked out, and we're saying, personal health, well, then in the strategic plan, it's going to break down how, as a district, are we supporting our students' health?
Exactly.
How, as a district, does equity and accountability and fairness play in to the health of our students? I guess to me, I felt this was, enough to then entrust to you in the next phase, the next phase of the committee and the next phase of this project, to then take it from there. I don't know if that kind of better explains that this, to me, and I think to a lot of the committee, was the first stepping stone of what's going to happen. And it does. And all of the things that you are saying are things that we had very, vibrant discussions on in the committee. It's really hard to pick the words. It was really hard to pick the 6 buckets. We went back and forth of what was more important in these 6 buckets. And really one of the things we did was, take things and say, global citizen and local citizen and volunteerism and kindness. Okay, well, those can fit into the similar kind of aspect. If you're empathetic, you a lot of times care about other citizens. So if we can group that together, okay, so we don't need all 12 of these descriptive factors, because they will come into play in the next phase of the project. And I know that is not relieving to hear at this point. Of course, we'd love for me, I would love an Excel sheet with every single word that was ever mentioned when we started this project. But again, to me, it was about getting phase 1 of these bigger picture items, and then going through the minutia of what that means to the strategic plan of how this then can be implemented into the broader picture of the district.
Thank you, Joanna and Hope. Next, I think we had Lisa. Pip, did you have your hand up again? Lisa, Margot, and Danielle, and Nathan.
I'm trying really hard to stay focused on the goal, which I think for all of us is to get to a completed strategic plan. So I'm trying to resist the impulse to get down in the weeds on the language here. But I feel like where I'm just still stuck is that I feel like our business is teaching kids. And this feels like it's sort of putting the burden on the kids to just like rise up to all of this stuff. And I think that's where I'm sort of getting stuck a little bit. And I'm a writer and I can't come up with the language. So I don't know that I could do a better job than you already did, as much as I feel like I'm getting stuck. Like I was sitting here like, could I make a motion to change the segue to be some other phrase that would be totally better? And I'm not sure that I can because it's a lot of work and there's a reason that it's hard to write this stuff. But I feel like I want it, kind of going back to what Pip said, to be like, these are our values, so that we're not saying that our kids are failures if they don't hit them all. And I mean, but I was thinking, well, could we say we value teaching our learners to be, but then it gets really clunky and we're still just adding more word salad to the front of something and it's distracting. So I'm not saying that that's the fix. But I mean, we talked about this when we brought this to the board the last time, about how we were really curious about how it was going to be framed. How is it going to be shared with our kids? Like, how is this going to be something, when they're in elementary school or middle school or high school, that they're going to be saying, these are our values. So when things inevitably bubble up, for example, like there will be moments when, despite all our best efforts, our kids don't live up to things in a way that needs to be addressed. And then we're going to put them in a room and say, kids, we expect these things of you. This is why we expect these things. And this is what we value. And here's how we're going to support you to get there. And this just feels like, is this the compass that's going to tell our kids that this is what we expect and what we are obligated to help them achieve? Or are we just telling them that this is what we expect? And I think that's where I get stuck, maybe. So, I don't want to get stuck in not approving this tonight, because I do not want to be back here again in 3 months still rehashing the same wordsmithing when it seems like we generally agree with the buckets. But I think the process needs to include the people up here much more. I think that, I've, talked to board members, all over the state about how they do this process. And it usually involves people who are on the board working in collaboration with the administration to think about, well, where do we think our strengths are? And do we see those strengths being elevated here? And where are our challenges? And do we see evidence that we recognize those and have an intention to address? So I think part of what you're hearing up here is that conversation hasn't happened. So I think we need to vote on this and then hope in the next stages that we will be included. And that's not clear to people sitting up here. So I think it's not to say that we're not included as much as we don't know what the next steps are. So we're voting on this and then hoping that there will be a process that involves a conversation with everybody. But we don't know that that's the case. Because this process so far hasn't really, we had one focus group for the board that was an hour long, and that's it. And I don't like the idea that the board goals weren't clear to the committee throughout the process, because those have been there for a while. So, I would ultimately vote for this to move the process forward and hope that by trusting the process we'll get to the next good steps. But I feel like we just have to be on record saying, I think what you're hearing is that people want to be more than asked to approve language when it's done. Because, it's like you're not going to have, the city council approve something that you never saw before. I just...
Zach, thank you, Lisa.
So if it's the will of the board to not restart, I don't want to overstate it.
No.
To significantly take a few steps back and to have the board be advised by what this group has done, and then have the board write these, then you should do it.
That
But I'm
is
just saying,
not...
or to develop some other process step. I'm not trying to throw out a red herring. I'm not trying to throw out a straw man. I'm not. It's legitimately I'm hearing some folks saying, I wasn't heavily enough involved in this. I don't think it represents necessarily what I think. I have been elected by my constituents to help create the vision for the schools, and the process is uncomfortable. What's been done up to this point, and so if I was to vote for this, I'd only vote for it because I'd be worried about a slowdown in process. But I don't feel happy with where we're at right now. If that's where you're at, then I wouldn't just accept. I wouldn't just go. I wouldn't just take something that because this is really important. When we worked on this, it is around this concept. Within education, we do a lot of backward design. We set up what we want to have. What do we want for outcomes for our learners first, students, and then we work on unit design and lesson planning from the end goal in mind, and then we work our way back. So that's what I think we're trying to do here, and I think when people do use Portrait of a Graduate, they're trying to create a parallel type of process. If this doesn't embed things that you feel are really important, then yeah, you're elected officials. We should slow down, recalibrate, and rework process if that's what people feel like would lead to. Because if this is flawed, inherently flawed, and you don't feel good about it, whatever happens next will not put you in a place where you're going to feel good about it, because our work is going to be to target these things, right?
I think that's not quite what I'm saying, Zach, if I may.
Yeah. I'm not saying you. I've
Right.
heard from multiple people.
At least from my perspective, what I feel like is I would want to move this forward. I appreciate the work that's gone in. I appreciate the number of people in the community who have had the chance to provide input. But I would also like there to be a deep discussion in the near future as a group about what is the board's role in the next steps, and how we can learn from the fact that at this point we haven't had enough of a collective conversation for people to feel fully clear on the process, so that we can prevent that as we're going into the strategic planning. Because I think ultimately what we all want to be able to say is, when we entrust kids to these schools from, pre-K all the way through graduation, that we have, a clear mission behind that the ways that we're teaching and the types of classes we're choosing are all driven by an intentional plan. That's what everybody wants at the end of the day. So I'm not saying delay this more, but I'm just thinking, we were here a few months ago saying we would come back with this based on feedback, and that's all that we've heard in the interim. Do you know what I mean? So I just would like there to be more checkpoints so that we know whether it's a superintendent's memo or whether it's just clarity on what we're doing at the table. Because I don't think we should be at the end of a strategic plan in this position of, here you go.
No.
And we don't know that that may not be the intention, but we don't know that it's not the intention right now.
It's definitely not the intention.
Right.
I think people have tried to authentically commit to the process that we tried to lay out. Anyways, I hear what you're saying.
Margot, and then I'd like to make a comment if somebody else. Danielle, did you want to go again?
Yes, but I can.
Okay, no, we'll do Margot, Danielle,
And
Nathan, and then me.
I will try to follow my notes and be brief. And I really appreciate the conversation and the effort. For me, what I'm hearing, and I align with everything that's said, is I think there's this incredible investment in a strategic plan and a ton of anxiety about we've been waiting for 4 years, and that is on no one. I don't say that as a blame. I'm giving you the backstory of there's angst. What I think this entire room agrees on is the buckets. And as a backwards designer, you start with the buckets and then you say, how do I know they've mastered that? And then how do I build for that? So I feel as though where we're in agreement is the buckets are solid. Where we're not in agreement is the wording of this feels unable to develop a successful, actualized plan to go forward. That's realistic. That accounts for every learner that we have in our district, every community member that comes into our schools. I think that's where the rub is. And there's some wonderings of, and I feel very strongly, we need to get into the strategic plan. Everybody is there. The students have been there. The faculty have been there. I don't want to delay that, but I wonder whether this is an opportunity to say, we've identified our buckets. That's what we're building towards. Do we have to have this lofty language, except for the challenge that all schools face, and this one particularly, this district, is that communication piece. Is you can't have buckets if nobody agrees on how do we define that. And I understand that the Portrait of a Graduate is seeking to do that. Here are our buckets. Here's how we define that. And I think we're struggling on the definitions. Feel unrealistic, unattainable, or difficult to get into the action items of those lofty goals of equity we've had for years. I don't see every student in this. And then with the mental health, I can't help but come back to the youth risk behavior survey that was presented to this board, and to hear that 33% of our students have considered suicide. 67% don't feel they can ask for help. That well-being feels like we are ignoring the data and being like, so let's go for it. We're all going to love ourselves. And so I think that's the anxiety you're hearing here of like, this doesn't line up with where we're at. It may line up with where we need to be, but there's a middle place. And that middle place is, this is what we agree on. How do we build back to build forward? And I feel like that's where we're at tonight. And maybe that's what we agree on. And maybe it's the semantics. But I would agree with my board members up here. We definitely want to push it forward. It's hard, but there's a lot of trust involved in pushing something forward that you're uncomfortable with the way it's laid out, because it's hard to push it forward sitting here realizing, I don't think that can be done. And then that feels like we would all set ourselves up. And this is no criticism on anyone. I think it's just we're all so invested. Let's do it right. Let's do it thoughtfully. Not that we haven't so far, but that's where I've landed.
So what I'm hearing, and I just want to make sure I'm clear that I'm really listening to you all, that what I'm hearing is you want to be more involved in the next phase of this work, in the strategic plan writing. and we need to bring the board goals as a data source. We need to bring the YRBS survey data as a data source, which is actually something Zach and I have discussed. We need to bring accountability data as a data source. It's not just these community surveys that we've been putting out. So the first thing I'm hearing is that you all want to be more involved in this next phase. The second thing that's really coming, I think I've heard it from almost all of you at this point, is this cannot be our learners are. This is about striving for. And so if we do vote to adopt this, I propose that we use that language that Joe presented, striving for. Because as Zach mentioned, none of us are there yet. It's unrealistic. So those are the two major points I keep hearing from multiple people, and I just wanted to make sure that I reiterate that I do hear you here.
Thank you, Leah. Danielle, and then Nathan.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to recalibrate my thinking on this. I think from a teacher's standpoint, I'm hearing what I would like to say would be all of, I would like to think that I can speak on our behalf is that that action step is going to be what drives us as a teaching body. I liked the analogy that Zach just used, because when I think of planning, I start, and I don't know if you guys know this, but our school is competency based. And so we did the really heavy work of like clearly defining competencies, breaking those down into skill-based benchmarks. The next step in your planning as a teacher is to come up with the assessment next. Then from there, if I know what I'm going to use to assess at the end, now I can build my lessons. And I will give to our previous Steve superintendent credit, threw out to us during COVID this wonderful template of building knowledge. How do you introduce it? How do you practice it? How do I feel good about doing it independently? And then how do I transfer it to other areas of my life? And if we think about this process of, these are our competencies, but they need to be worded in a way that reflect that competent level of, there's room above it. We can strive for the excellent, but it sounds like we still need to come up with, if it is the portrait of a graduate, what do we want all of our kids to have? Because that is what teachers are going to be teaching to. And I already, in my head, started doing how do I take my existing curriculum and fold these 6 values into it evenly and thoughtfully and workably on the ground? How am I going to actually teach? And it's doable. I can see it. I can see each of those buckets being addressed within my curriculum, and that's what teachers are going to want. Is what do you want us to defend our curriculum against based on the values that we as a community have agreed upon? And so I'm thinking that the wordsmithing is important, but at the same time, our competencies shifted when we built our benchmarks and when we realized the language wasn't perfect around it, and we went back as a school, we went back to our competencies multiple times, and we narrowed down or we expanded where necessary. So I don't understand necessarily and this is above my pay grade, but the voting process tonight, is it something that is solid, or is it something that can be shifted as we get into the strategic plan work and as we create assessments and say, wait, we can't assess this, we need to change the language so that it is accessible and accountable? Like, is there room for that malleability, or are we afraid of that malleability as we move forward?
Thank you, Danielle. Nathan.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Danielle said there. I mean, it's definitely just the ability to, I feel like tonight we're all over-articulating this a little bit. I mean, I do apologize if that comes off in the wrong way. But, I mean, this is the first phase. However many phases after this, I mean, I don't know. I hope someone does. But once we move on from this phase, we go into strategic planning and we make more and more edits to this. So I do think this voting tonight, it doesn't set anything in stone, and we can word pick anything we want here. Like our Portsmouth learners strive to be intrinsically motivated. We can add all that stuff in the second phase. So I do think that we need to get over this hurdle tonight, but the voting is off to you guys. But that's just how I feel.
Thank you. Now, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so let me throw a, I don't know, stink bomb, something. So I think, I would say the reverse. I think not from Nathan. I would just say, like, we're moving towards this, let's approve this, and then as we think about deeper involvement from the board in the next stages. Well, the next stages are like action steps and like what's happening on the ground. What are people actually doing to make some of these things happen? I think the board is best positioned. Like, this is the essential thing the board should control. What are the values of the school district? What do you want? What do you, again, as elected representatives of the people, who are entrusted with overseeing the schools, what are you expecting the schools to do? And then you have some input on what that's going to look like, and then you hire people to do the work, and then you evaluate whether or not those people are doing the work. But you hire people with professional expertise in a variety of different areas to make the best trained judgments around what to do in terms of the implementation of some of these ideas and what those, and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking, there's a whole bunch of people who have expertise far beyond me in all these different areas that we've hired, multiple master's degrees, all kinds of time in the field. And those are the folks I think you want to design your action steps.
Can I give an example
Yeah.
to sort of back up your point? So if social emotional learning is one of the focus areas that we all decide on, then we're pulling in the head of guidance. We're pulling in, people that do this work day in and day out with young people in our community. And so maybe the head of guidance is the person that runs that subcommittee. But to Zach's point, we're pulling in the experts on that particular focus area. And that's what the subcommittees are for. We may need to go beyond, we probably will go beyond the committee that we've established in the past, because we don't have the head of guidance on there. And again, I'm just using one example because there are a lot of different ways that this could go, especially when it comes to the YRBS survey or when it comes to your board goals. But to be clear, that's one example of, like you said, experts on the subject that we would need to pull in.
Thank you, Leah. Okay, I just have a few comments. I was on the committee. I went to all the meetings. The committee worked so hard, and wordsmithing took hours to figure out the right words that we could put into these goals. It was always my understanding, and Leah, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is the easy, not easy, but this is the more simple work. The real work starts now, and you've said this to me a couple of times. The real work starts now with, okay, so we have personal well-being. That's when the suicide comes into it. That's when all these surveys come into, okay, what are we going to do with this personal well-being goal? We're going to address suicide, and this is all in the strategic plan. We're going to address suicide by doing A, B, C, D, and E. We already do a few things at the high school with our suicide prevention. But so take all of these, like somebody said, equity. Well, I know that we talked about in the goal that says our leaders embody kindness, empathy, and compassion, inclusive of all individuals. So we want our students to recognize all people, all people that are out there. So we are talking about equity here. Okay, but what are we going to do to get that equity. Okay, so in the strategic plan, you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what we're going to do to have our students recognize all people. So to me, and to Lisa's point, these, we should vote on these. Maybe we want to change, we value learners who strive to be healthy individuals, or we value learners who embody kindness, and, maybe we need to do a little bit of wordsmithing with that. But it was my understanding that now the real work starts. Okay, these are the goals, and this is how we're going to get to those goals. And you said that to me many times. The real work starts now.
Yep.
So we have to, and I guess if it's okay with Leah, who runs the Great Schools Partnership, if we want to involve more board members in that, then let's do that. If the board would like to be more involved in how we're going to achieve these goals, then let's have more board. I already volunteered to continue. I know Kerry is really interested in it, so I don't know if she's, we don't know, but we can.
Joe just volunteered.
But if other people, if other board members want to get involved, there's no reason why as many board members as possible could get involved with this. Danielle, where you're a teacher, Nathan, we're a student. We could involve more if that's what we want to do. But the real work starts now. That's always been my understanding of this process.
I think to expand on that too, and to kind of go off, in my layman's term, kind of what Zach said in here and what kind of some of you said, is that this is the community bringing to you their asks.
Right.
This is the community bringing to you, and the committee was made up of myself, Nancy, teachers, principals. This is and then you add in all the surveys. So I can understand the frustration of saying like, hey, we weren't involved in this. But I guess to me, as a resident, I'm looking to say I was involved in this process, and now I'm asking you to figure out how we could, I'm asking you to, work on what the next part of the plan is. I can understand the frustration of being like, well, I would have loved to be part of the first plan. But to me, I compare it to, the CIP, a citizen's request. So as a citizen, I'm asking you, as a representative of the committee, as a citizen, asking you to take these buckets and to build backwards in the plan. So I think that if we can view it that way, I think some of the angst of, I don't really love the wording in this bucket, and how do we get there? Well, we'll get there. But again, I think that to me is a synopsis of this, is that we're presenting this to you, so that when you are working on the strategic plan, it's, you have these pillars that again, I know I've said it before, almost 1,000 members of the community, of the working community that are invested in this, have come to, and that is a staggering number when you look at what surveys end up being in our city. When you look at our election, we only had about 6,000 people vote, and so you have a sixth of that speaking, to ask you to,
Okay, can we wrap this up, do we think? Okay, Hope and Lisa, and let's try to wrap this up. Hope.
I'll be real quick. I agree with Margot in that it does seem like we're all agreeing that on the pillars. And I think when we first started this way back whenever, the question was asked in the surveys, what do you value? That's the feedback we got. And so I don't have a problem with the pillars. I have a problem with us not understanding how they're going to drive things. And that's where I feel like people need to get on board with. They are values. So I think it's important for the board and the administration, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Leah, as the consultant at the table, trying to drive the craziness, how that's going to drive the board goals and how that's going to drive the operational plan. I actually would not encourage a bunch of board members to be part of the strategic planning. The strategic planning is the execution. It's the boots on ground. It's the operational plan that the superintendent is going to manage and drive. And I think when you get board members involved in that, it's at a very high level that's not boots on ground, it's going to bog down the work. That's just my personal opinion. Not that the work, I think, can't come back for communication purpose more often. I think it's clear tonight that there needs to be more dialogue and communication throughout the process than there has been with the board. But I do think when you're trying to operationalize and execute something, it really needs to be the boots on ground that's coming around that. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Hope. And Lisa, and then we're gonna, Pip, okay. Then we'll wrap this up. Lisa?
So I felt like what Danielle and Nathan were saying about the idea of letting the things that the people who are doing the work in the buildings see as the strategic elements that we want to execute, having that nailed down, and then looking back at this language to say, does it need to be tweaked in some way so that the things are aligned? Because what everybody wants is for it to be aligned by the time we get through the whole process. So what I'm not hearing is an opportunity to go back at the wording later. And I think that the headline, empathy and kindness, is fantastic, but I might, think by the time we get through figuring out what does that look like in the curriculum, or what is that we really think we want to do once we get down into the weeds with the people in the buildings, I feel like we should be able to reword that. So, I'm much more comfortable with this if what we're voting on tonight is we agree with these buckets. I don't think anybody's disputing that. So if that's a possibility, and we know that there will be a possibility based on even just feedback from people who are in the buildings who say, I'm in a classroom, this piece makes sense. This piece doesn't make sense, but it would make sense in a slightly different way. I'd like the opportunity to come back maybe towards the middle or wherever in the strategic planning process and say, we've actually decided that maybe this is not quite right to sort of articulate this goal. We think now it might be something different, and then to have that conversation and have the board be a part of that conversation. Because I think where we're getting stuck is that it feels like it's already baked and we're just kind of being asked, do we like it or not like it, instead of what's the recipe. And I guess, so I would really want us to move forward, but just put that idea out there, that if there's points to sort of know that there will be some fluidity to the wording as we get going.
Thank you, Lisa. Pip?
Actually, that was exactly what I was going to say, and I would like an answer on that to understand if that is a possibility or not.
How would you frame that in a motion? Can you frame that in a motion?
Do we need a motion?
No, I don't want to make
we
a motion.
wanna
I want to
approve it.
understand if that's a possibility, given what we're being asked to do. We're saying we're not comfortable moving forward, setting this in stone tonight, but is it a possibility to move forward knowing that we're on the right track and that we have concerns about the beginning of each phrase, but that we may, that we would like to approve moving forward, but we still want the flexibility of being able to make changes as we go along if we learn new things or have to adjust.
Brian?
We're the board. I think we can change this process as long as we all agree on it. I just want to be careful that we don't make huge changes to these things. I like the idea of tweaking. The word tweaking sounds right, feels right, especially when we get in the weeds, like you say. But I think we can decide how we want to change the process along the way. So, say yes.
Zach, and then Margot.
I think it's healthy to have it be an iterative process, and it feeds into some of what you were talking about, Hope. It's the evaluation of the end goal is well informed at times by what are the tangible steps that are going to be taken towards the end goal, right? So for me, what I want to make sure is, as we invite people into that process, I want to make sure that the core of this is intact so that I don't ask people to do a bunch of work and then I pull the rug out from underneath them after they did a bunch of work. So I'm not talking about, the language being set in stone. It's just conceptually, are we more or less conceptually in agreement so that, again, yeah, as I pull people in, they're confident that they're driving towards something which will inform tweaking of this and also is work that's going to be going someplace. That's all.
Okay, so can I suggest a motion that we approve the buckets with the definite change of we value learners who strive to become in all of the, are there 6 of them altogether? I didn't, okay, so we changed that wording. We value learners who strive. Okay, and you can easily do that, I think. And then we continue the process of setting up the strategic plan with, we have 2 board members already. Do we want to add another board member to that?
Nancy?
Okay, wait, let me finish. Okay, so that the process moves forward, and after every, well, let's say every month, 1 meeting a month, we come back to the board with an update of how that subcommittee is doing. Does somebody want to make that motion?
I just want to be clear that what I heard over here was a little different. That, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pip, but what I thought I heard was we want to approve the titles of the buckets, not necessarily the words underneath.
A proven concept. I would say that seems to be coverage. The board would approve the pillars and concept to move forward to the next step.
Okay, and how do we do that? Do we go back to our original committee and add another board member? So now we have 3 board members as we redefine the language of these pillars?
I would say that you leave the redefinition until you start the work. Until we, so literally, if I was up there, the motion I would make would be that we approve the portrait of the graduate pillars, buckets in concept to move forward to the starting of the strategic plan. And then you can come back and amend any type of wording before you approve any final documents.
Okay, does everybody agree with that motion?
Are we saying that we are agreeing to these pillars as our values? I guess, and I don't mean to be getting hung up in the word.
Yes, I
But
believe we're
when
saying
people
that.
use the words as goals, that's very different than a value. And very different. And so I keep reiterating that for so many reasons that just seem to not be connected.
What word
tonight. So
satisfies you?
Well, if they're values, then let's say that we are basically approving or voting, because you may or may not approve, these values, these 6 values.
Okay, we can use the word values.
That's a problem for people, so then.
So when you look at the document as a full page, it says at the top, our community values, and then it says these 6 things. So
there you go.
I don't think that would change sort of how we've interpreted it already.
And then as far as the language goes, I mean, we can put we value, if people want to put we value learners, which by the way, Pip, I actually looked up student and learners, and student is around someone that's actually being taught, but a learner doesn't have to have a teacher. They are inquisitively knowledgeable of seeking knowledge for themselves, which I thought was very applicable to this space here and to our students. So just a tidbit. But yeah, I guess, because again, it's about how is this document driving everything else that's going to happen in this district. We keep talking about a strategic plan, but we keep forgetting board goals, which really should have been brought to the table way earlier. So I just want to encourage people to think about, if these are the values that we're seeking within our district and within students, then you're going to then marry that to a strategic plan and to board goals that support the execution of these values. So.
Okay, the motion, approve the portrait of a graduate values and move forward to set up our strategic plan and have fluidity in the language.
Yes.
Nancy,
Do
can
we have a motion to
separate that?
approve? Pardon me?
Could we separate that? Because I think we could have a clean vote to just approve.
the values.
We approve these 6 values identified by the portrait of a graduate committee, just period. And not worry about what it says underneath. We're leaving the flexibility. and then we're not at this second
So approve the 6 values
identified by the portrait.
identified by the,
Is that what you're called, the portrait of a graduate committee? I mean,
well, we can. That's what it is. Okay.
sorry.
Do we have a motion to approve that?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Oh,
For this?
Nathan?
Council meetings got feisty.
Should I ask for the restatement of that motion, or are we all set?
I think we're all set.
Okay.
Oh, all right, our rules say, approve the motion is to approve the 6 values identified by the Portrait of a Graduate Committee. And it was, who approved it? Who was the first?
Motion by Ann, seconded by Brian.
Okay.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Margot Peabody,
Yes.
Nancy Clayberg,
Yes.
Hope Van Epps.
Yes.
I'm gaining steam. Brian French,
Yes.
7-0.
Thank you for your patience.
So I'm sorry, I have
Yes,
a
go
question.
ahead, Hope.
Regarding the language, I just want to go back to Zach's point, and I want to understand, and I want it on the record with clarity of what are the next steps around the language, because, you know, to the point of, I don't know if it were you or Margot, or maybe both of you said it, that there does have to be clear, agreeable language to work against, and I don't want to see that wiggled out halfway into the strategic plan or into, I mean, you really need that when we say knowledge or we say well-being, you know, we're talking about emotional, mental, whatever it is, but there needs to be solid language. So
what I would anticipate in advance of pulling back together the working group and starting to look at questions 3 and 4 in order to develop kind of the next, not going to call them buckets anymore, but those kind of core action pieces would be, I agree, I think that we would need to rework the language, but what I'm hearing is it's a softening and a clarity of these are not goals for students to reach by graduation that they're accountable for, but it is this conceptual striving as a school district we strive to, or so I think we'd work, Leah and I, with a couple other folks probably, would just work on that, so that when we reconvene the working group and start to do the analysis of 3 and 4, we're having it through the prism of the softened language version of this, which would not, I don't necessarily know about, I know there were some specific things you were talking about, Hope, like include like mental health somewhere, the words mental health somewhere in there. I'm less clear on that.
I didn't say that.
Okay,
I don't know what you're
okay.
talking
So
about.
the softening, the softening language is, I think we can work on what that looks like on the front end, and just having that be, you know, that front feeder be the same thing on each of the.
So can that be brought in before this board concludes? Because I guess I just voted on something and then another board can come in and vote in language that,
Well, we'll
So
do
I'm
the
just
best we
trying to
can.
figure out how
We'll
that
do the
works.
best we can.
Depends,
You know,
yeah.
it just depends on
Yeah.
timing and, okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. Joanna Kelly, Leah.
Thank you,
so
guys.
much.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
putting
much.
time
2
to
nights in
us.
a row.
You need a night off. Leah, you too, I'm sure.
Thanks, Leah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Really
very
appreciate it.
much. Okay, we are down to the superintendent's report.
One, just both informational pieces, the email summary, and then the budget schedule is in there. Again, I just want to make sure that people are clear. We do not have, at this moment, on the budget schedule, we've got workshops built in there. I will tell you that we don't have subject areas that are necessarily in there yet, but we were having some conversation today about 2 different elements we think we've heard repeatedly as we move forward. One is we feel like we're going to use one of those workshop sessions, probably right on the front end, to give you several different snapshots about the ways in which to think about equity between our schools in terms of distribution of resources, whether those be human or financial. And so we think one of those will be a series of different types of snapshots of ways to think about that, and give you some data to some comparison data to try to think about what's happening between each of our schools. So there's one, and the other was, I think there was been a couple times, and I was talking today with Nathan and Rick Maddie, the director of student support, and the idea of a couple times conversations about out-of-district placements and when are we utilizing out-of-district placements, and to try for the board to try to wrap their mind around what's the process by. This is the conversation I was having with Rick today. You know, maybe by the third session, I was talking about January 30th, having him come in and do a presentation about like, well, how does a student eventually get to the point where we're contemplating an out-of-district placement? What does that process look like? How does that work? Who's at the table? How do we make those types of evaluations? How many students we have out of district now? What's been the history over the last several years about the number of districts number of students who have been out of district? What are the types of programs, while being careful to not be individually identifiable? And what would be the thought process or trigger to identify enough of a cluster of students to determine we would want to bring a program back in-house, because that's been a conversation too. So those are two things that I know we think other things, there's going to be other things that bubble to the surface as we are still working through. We've done our first set of conversations with cost center leaders, so principals, directors, department heads, and now we've kind of gone through the wish list phase, and now we're going to now get into the next churn for us, where we start to try to boil down what we're going to try to bring to you as a recommendation. So I think as we get into that part and we start making some tough decisions, Nathan's going to talk in a minute on the agenda. He's going to give you an ESSER update, some things that intertwine with ESSER coming to an end. That's going to be part of that. I think we'll have some additional stuff that we'll want to do that we're going to suggest to you is worthy of your time during some budget workshop time. But we're also going to want to be responsive to things that you want to hear more about as you try to make good budget decisions. So just a heads up that's where our thinking is at the moment.
Thank you, Zach.
Quick question, Zach?
Yes.
If there are pieces that we do have questions about, is there a timeline when you would want to hear those questions from us? I mean, we could certainly send them to Nancy to forward on, but I just want to make sure that we're not springing stuff on you after like all the meetings are scheduled.
I would say start, I don't know, Nathan, you think Paulette's the best, where one singular place to kind of become a repository of those things, and then as we go through process, it's best for us to have some of those questions in front of us as we're going through process with people, as opposed to trying to backfill after. So yeah, I think right away start firing those questions to Paulette, and she'll start
okay,
and she'll start accumulating those and trying to feed them to us. So as we're going through our next stage of our process, we're being thoughtful about that and collecting the information as we go.
Because I think what we wanted to know is if it's, say, like maybe several board members had questions around a certain topic, then that makes sense. But if it's only one of us and maybe it's not really a priority that's already bubbled up, then maybe that's not where we want to focus. So just to be able to focus that way.
And we want to be responsive as we can. And it might be, in some cases, it might not be that we're in during the budget season, it might not be that everything ends up at the board level. If somebody has one burning question, it might be that we're in some way getting back to you individually about your one burning question.
Sure.
So,
Lisa, good suggestion. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to, are you finished? Somebody has a question?
I just had a quick question about the budget meetings. Can I ask that now?
Sure.
Refresh my memory if it's exactly like it was in the past, but the reopen public hearing is on the 13th, and then the board adopts the budget 7 days later. So I know often we don't have discussion in public meeting around public comment. So I'm just wondering if that can be bumped up, or how have we handled that in the past? If you can remind me, please, Nathan, has it been that close where we might get public feedback but not really have the opportunity to discuss that feedback and as a board or with our administration to integrate any of that feedback if need be?
I mean, most of this is primarily set up in terms of where the public hearings lie, right? I mean, basically it was take your Tuesdays. What are the Tuesdays of regular board meetings?
Right.
The ones that are not regular board meetings become workshops, and then public hearings attached to regular board meeting scheduled nights. And it just so happens in terms of this one that it falls because of the sequence of where those are, that falls close to the end. And maybe it did last year too.
I feel like we've had time in between that we've been able to just have, I mean, not that we have
No, and I guess
full
that's
of people
what I was
with
going to say is,
feedback,
I
but
think,
I think it can help not having surprise
yeah.
comments the
So-
night of adoption.
And I think part of what, I mean, looking back at it, remember that in each of those workshop sessions, you certainly can, as a part of your agenda, open up for public comment. The public hearing, which is a no holds barred, that's a chartered expectation of our budget process.
Right.
And I guess it's worth noting that in at least 2 of the past 4 years I've been here, you've tossed like in this case, the meeting of the 20th, you've been satisfied with your deliberations and you've voted it in the preceding week, so as to give yourselves a Tuesday night off. I mean, you know what I mean? So not to come back for more discussion of the same things you've already discussed. And so I think it was convenient here that we hit the regular meetings when the public is more likely to anticipate your in session and they could be here. But you were certainly in a position to consider public input at any of those sessions. And I'm trying to remember, it may have been that the calendar struck that we had an earlier meeting that was a regular meeting, and so you felt like you had more
Space between.
you had more space between. There's no reason why you couldn't hold a public hearing, but I think it just felt in keeping with the public's expectations that you're going to be meeting second and fourth Tuesdays. So.
And if I can just add, if something comes up on the 13th, let's say we have 100 people here that are all asking for one item or a couple of items, we can always put in, you know, as it says in our rules, we can always set up a special meeting. So if that happened, you know, 2 or 3 nights later, we could say, hey, we have to have a meeting on this.
I
So-
know we're also bumping up against dates to meet the city
Right.
council's
Right. Yes.
request
Right.
of having our
Yeah.
adoption. So that's, I just was trying to think about years past. There did seem to be more wiggle room, so thank you for refreshing my memory.
Thank you, Hope. Okay. Can we move on to the ESSA report? Do you want to introduce it, or is Nathan going to?
So Nathan's going to talk about ESSER funding. No, we want to give you an update on where we're at now. What remains as we get towards we're on the tail end of this kind of 3-wave process now. And I think Nathan's goal is to kind of give you some context to what has been what do those waves look like and where are we at as we're trying to wrap things up, and then also having a thoughtful eye on, as that ends, what does that mean? What are some things we're going to have to consider as part of our budget process, because ESSER was supporting those things, and then ESSER will be receding as we move into the FY25 conversation.
So
Oh, look at that.
remembering, so this is one of those, remember we had that meeting here, was it, 2 weeks ago or a month ago? We met in conference room A because that board is so far away.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's in your, it's not as big as you think it is when you have to see it, but I'm going to, for the purposes or for the benefit of the public, you folks have all seen these slides, at least the first few of them. You've seen them before. I'll be quick, but I think for the benefit of the public, it's appropriate to take 30 seconds and reflect on where we've come from. So remember, COVID's in the rear view, at least as a pandemic, because it's maybe still with us in a lot of ways, but the pandemic started in March of 2020, and in the year that followed, there were 3 stimulus bills that came through. They were referred to as the CARES Act, the CRISA Act, and then the ARP Act. Significant dollars. that were offered up as stimulus for our economy and impacted multiple layers of our community, our nation. Elementary and secondary school dollars were included in all three of these and became known as ESSER. So we talk about ESSER, ESSER, and that's the elementary and secondary school emergency relief dollars. I want to walk you through very quickly what we've done with them and where we stand moving forward. The first was ESSER 1, which is all after the fact. We call it ESSER 1, the CARES Act. It brought to this community $286,000. I would tell you about this and all of them, all of these grants, that they've been funded through or managed through the state's online portal called the Grants Management System, through a process that requires us, although we know the allocated dollars we're entitled to, it's a process that asks for us to first make application to the state, gain approval from the SEA, the State Education Agency, which is the Department of Ed, and then go ahead against that approval and make spending decisions and then claim reimbursement. So in the normal course of events, we don't get the dollars up front. We get the approval, we apply, then we spend, then we get reimbursed. We spent those dollars, that first $286,000, largely on Chromebooks. There's $126,000 and change devoted to that. Remember that as we dealt with the return to school, we had some extra busing costs because we did midday, we did AM, PM, we did midday runs. We had kids we were busing out to Gundalow, Camp Gundalow in Greenland. We had kids we were moving over and retrieving from both space at the senior center and space at community campus as we worked to have a limited number of well socially distanced students and staff in the buildings in the mornings and then swap out a different set of students in the afternoon. So there were some busing costs there. We outfitted each of our schools with outdoor tents so that we could drive outdoor time, both as a mask break to let students be outside during some of those long days, but also to encourage more movement. Instructional support was actually some time spent in one of those first summers, staff working with students on some learning loss, but also some socialization and reconnection as we anticipated the ramp up to our new school year. And then some stuff. Obviously, some of those dollars were rentals of space at community campus because we weren't owners then. We were just renting space out there that was available to us, as well as some software. I could make this comment multiple times in this presentation. Products that you've seen, some of you as parents, your kids working or benefiting from, Edpuzzle and Seesaw and Pear Deck, and a lot of these remote tools that make some of us cringe sometimes now when we hear because we were thrown into some of these. But that's how we spent $286,000 early in the pandemic. What followed, and I didn't remove this slide, I thought it was useful and important to hear, was one exception to what I just said, which was the CARES Act monies flowed through to states as well as to school districts. And in the state of New Hampshire, the governor's office and or the emergency management folks that were empowered with this, they determined a plan to provide $200 per student to every school district in the state. That money, they literally sent us a check under the cover of darkness in October of that year. We got a check for $400 grand, but that money had about 60 days. We had to use it, have it all we had to have benefit of all of the spending by December 30th, or we had to give the money back. So in that very quick window, we paid down some of the busing that I just got done describing. We paid for some technology hardware and some more of that software. We actually paid for some of the staffing that we put at community campus and senior center to supervise some of those students whose turn it was not at that moment to be in the buildings. And then we spent the majority of that, $280,000 of that, on PPE, all of the equipment, the masks, the gloves, the you name it, and all of the plexiglass construct that we ended up purchasing and then constructing to isolate reception and clerical staff, guidance counselors, and teachers even. So those dollars went very quickly because they had to between October of 20 and December of 2020. So the second of the ESSERs came from the CRISA Act, which brought to us $1.2 million. And Again, it was all managed through that same allocate, apply, approve, spend, reimburse through the grants management system of the state. But the State Department of Education introduced to us in that time a new litmus test, which was that our spending must prepare for, prevent, or respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are greater measures or parameters applied to the last of these, but in this case, it was new through ESSER 2. We applied and spent, and here is how those dollars have been allocated. The numbers that you'll see there referred to the years, the fiscal years where there was impact. So student Chromebooks, I think those of you that focused on it know that we have withdrawn, if you will, or reduced our operating budget in each of the last few years by dollars that we could use in ESSER to fund Chromebook recycling and other technologies. So just over $250,000 have gone into student Chromebooks over those 3 years, as well as additional technologies, including things like the charging stations and the Promethean boards that we've put into a lot of the classrooms. There's summer programming that has gone on over those 3 summers, 92,000 change. And then staffing. I should have highlighted that to make sure that they looked like people as opposed to just lines. But the math tutor at the middle school, in both the fiscal 22 and fiscal 23 years, the outdoor education teacher working at the elementary level, who really came into being in fiscal 23 and is still there this year. The social worker who was hired in the spring of 22, so for the second almost half of 22 and then all of 23, and then the school counselor at the middle school through the year 23, and the math interventionist who was not quite a full year in 23 at the high school. And then beyond that, there was some small dollars spent again on tents, some air quality issues, and some water filtration, and replacing the old bubblers that don't support well COVID. Well, they do support well virus and COVID, right? So we replaced those along with some additional support, instructional support, which is textbook, other materials. That was how $1.2 million were invested over the course of those three years for ESSER 2. So ESSER 3 is in front of us. It continues to be managed as the others have been. It leans on the same litmus test, although there is a set aside of 20% that we should use to address learning loss arising out of the pandemic. That spending is available. That opportunity to spend is available to us through September 30th of next year. And here is the current plan for the use of those funds. Some of this, it's clearly committed because there are people actually earning these dollars. Some of these dollars are already committed because we're into November at this point, and then some of them are still pending. And the more you see round zeros at the end, the more of a general number that is, as opposed to specific. So in the area of learning loss, you'll see that the outdoor educator is still here, as is the math interventionist at the high school. At Dondero, recognizing some of the class sizes and challenges that we had there, we identified some of these dollars to support tutors to assist this year in those classrooms. The asterisks that are really small to see on the staff suggest that those are positions that are without a funding source for fiscal 25, because this grant is ending. The little caret beside the kindergarten tutors makes clear that those positions were identified as 1 year only when they were approved and created. The 21st Century Learning Program is continuing this year. We did not receive federal funding for the 21st Century Learning Program that runs at New Franklin and supports a population of students in the after-school time for that building. It was consistent with the goals of the academic growth and support of learning loss, and so we have added that to the ESSER plan for this year, with every expectation that reapplication will bring us 21st century dollars from the federal level again for the subsequent school year. And then there are placeholders right now. There was some summer programming that was completed this year, but all in, we'll spend somewhere in the order of $50,000 between this summer and next And then there are additional instructional technologies that I assume that we will continue to spend on the Pear Decks and the Ed puzzles and the like. And then other uses that are not specifically to address learning loss, that social worker position that everyone has been very pleased with is the third of the positions that did not manage to be moved from ESSER into the operating budget in the most recent budget development cycle we had with the City Council. They did accept the math tutor position and the counselor position, so these three remain: the elementary outdoor educator, the high school math interventionist, and the social worker position. Both this year and in next year's summer, the FY25 first 2 or 3 months, July, August, September, we expect that we can continue to use dollars from ESSER to support the Chromebook turn that we're doing. Remember that from our conversation, the cycle there really is that we bring in new Chromebooks. We bring in new Chromebooks at the 9th grade, and we cycle out Chromebooks down to the lower grades. We also bring in Chromebooks, I think, at 6th grade to serve through the middle school years. So we're moving those down to younger grades, and we're continuing to roll some out and move them into 6th and 9th grades on a regular cycle. So those dollars are ending because ESSER has supported that for all of these years. In the category of infrastructure, remember we made a commitment that the window replacement work we were going to do at Dondero and the repairs at Little Harbor, those will come out of ESSER funds. I won't dig deeply, but remember we traded dollars there, ESSER for this, so that we could have dollars out of the operating and CIP to support the Robert J. Lister renovation over community campus. And then the safety communications, which is really the more and more you have students out of the building and outside and moving, the more important it became and the more we realized the needs for communications. So these are communications tools, these are radios that are going to serve us in the building, out of the building, and on the ground so that we have access to all of the resources we might need regardless of where we are. So that is the spending plan for that 2.7 million wrapped up in ESSER 3 that has to be spent by September. I just wanted to remind, if I haven't already said in that process, there are 3 positions now in ESSER 3 that need to be addressed as we contemplate what we're doing for FY25. And then that technology spending that I just referenced, predominantly Chromebooks, but also a lot of the software and the tools that we grew to use in remoting that have become mainstream in much of our instructional practice. We need to identify those and make sure that they're added in and included in our operating budgets moving forward in fiscal year 26 and beyond. So,
Thank you, Nathan.
big deep breath. Wanted to, for you and for the public, so that, I mean, this will obviously, this plays back. So, obviously, I'm open to questions.
Can I just ask a question? How much do we need for that, for our budget then? The math, the social worker, the outdoor education, so this is what we need to put in our budget for next time, correct?
If all three of those positions and programs are intended for next year, then those numbers plus the adjustment for salary increases and health increases, et cetera, these are all in numbers. I have to look down the table and smile at Mr. French, because I know multiple times in the first couple of years he looked at me and he said, these can't be fully loaded, are they? And that hasn't been the climate or the culture, the way that they've communicated. But in this case, obviously, dealing with federal dollars, these are all in. So that those numbers, when you look at them, are not salary. That's salary, taxes, retirement costs, and health and dental benefits as well, employer costs. So, yeah, those would grow by not huge dollars, but they would grow as you move them forward to FY25.
Okay, so the total would be 155 plus 134 plus.
Plus 117, so that's 400, round up 400 and a quarter for it, something like that, with the increases that'll come.
Okay.
Or make
Thank
up.
you.
I mean, we've still got work to do, so
Yeah.
it's
Right,
not a,
okay. It's not carved in stone.
yeah, in terms of what we'd bring you, none of it's carved in stone.
Right. Brian?
What is that going to be in terms of percent?
All by itself?
So, I mean, just in terms of contract increases,
Yeah.
we'd be starting, we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, we're four, it
Four-
actually looks
four
more
out
like
the gate.
4.1, 4.2 out of
We're out of
the
the
gate.
gate without those positions.
Without those positions. And these are roughly, what, 0.5%, maybe, 0.8%?
Yep. So we're, and one of the, I mean, I've made an estimate our 10-year rolling COLA, which is baked into all of our collective bargaining agreements generally, many of those now have a floor of 3% and a ceiling of 5%. There's a couple that are not a floor of 3%, they're a floor of 2% still left over from the past. I think our 10-year rolling COLA will be just, I think it's going to fall just short of 3%. We've been looking, but I'm not sure that the CIP is going to give us quite as much of a boost into the 10-year average as we would need to get over 3%. So, but I won't know that until the first or second week, whenever that November release comes out, the first or second week of December, and then the city will we'll put those numbers together. But it's even, I mean, I've tried to be reasonable with those estimates. Health insurance came in at an 8% clip, but just because we're talking about it, just so you can know. But that, again, goes back into a 10-year rolling average of increase. So that'll still be something in the 5.5% to 6% range that we'll put into the budget. All of that I run into that 4+% out of the gate, kind of continuing services before you start adding, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Hope?
First, thank you for making these loaded numbers super helpful in
Certainly.
how we
Thank you.
used to do it. The Dondero kindergarten tutors, how many is that? 3.
3.
And do we know what's driving the need for 3 tutors there?
The
versus-
class size, that was a class size
Thing.
mitigation.
Oh, okay.
So.
And in terms of these other positions, I know with the social worker, we had intentionally talked about kind of rolling off the salary. So, for instance, say we have ESSER funds to cover, say, half that, and the city meets us halfway for 2024, and then we pick up all in 2025. Is that
Throw that out.
It's out the window
so
now?
remember what
There's
we
no longer- yeah.
what we did in that last session. So for FY24, we made the decision. You made the decision as a board to take care for the future and asked for all 5 positions
Right.
that were in ESSER, and ultimately 2 of them stayed, and we were looking at, we had talked about being graduating them,
Yeah.
that all 5 of them could be half of them on the ESSER for a year while the district picked up half. But ultimately, we asked for all 5 and got 2, and instead of it being half and half and half, it was just those 2 positions. So as we move forward, we won't actually find benefit in FY25 for any of them, because although I may be able to pick up some Chromebooks in the summer, I won't actually start paying any of these people until we hit essentially the end of the fiscal window, which is September. So all 3 now fully loaded are an impact that we have to consider.
We did, I mean, we made that pitch
Yeah.
once we got beyond you guys, we made that pitch multiple times around, let's not put ourselves in a cliff situation.
Right.
Can we do a step down?
Yeah.
That was not ultimately what was decided.
Yeah.
There are, when we get, I mean, you guys have seen that, but there are, when we get there, many competing priorities, and
Yes.
and the conversation certainly included none of them at one point. So we were pleased we were able to shift those 2, and
Are we, there's always competing
Yep.
factors, right? I mean, I think about your desire for technology stuff that desperately needs to happen. But there's always going to be competing factors. Where are we in the ability to do anything along the lines of competing out the gate of 4% with inflation and retirements and benefits? And I just see this as an ongoing issue, and I feel like since I've been here, Nathan, you've done a great job of like trying to be creative, I just feel like every safety net has been used. And now it feels like we're getting down to bare bones, and I just wonder how our district can be sustainable, which is why I want to understand more about even hiring practices. Like, where is there any room left to be creative, to be sustainable? And I mean, everyone thinks, oh, Portsmouth has no problems, we have this giant budget, but we have to be realistic in sustainability. If you're 4% out the gate every year, and your superintendent recognizes there's other needs, and we ignore those needs, right? The house is eventually gonna crumble down around you. So, I know you've worked a lot of magic while you've been in here, but it's just a realistic question, and maybe you don't have an answer tonight.
So can I just say,
Yeah,
just to feed off of
please.
Nancy's real quick? When you were adding up, like, well, then, if we add all these positions in, then what's it gonna be? That's why I kind of threw that caveat in there, is we're not necessarily coming back to you asking for those 3 positions, or we're not necessarily asking for all the FTEs that we had within the city budget last year and the addition of additional FTEs because of exactly that. I mean, I always want to make sure that our approaches we're thoughtful about being sustainable. We're thoughtful about we'll bring to you. I just got the latest NESDEC enrollment projections, the newest version, and we'll bring that in to talk to you about that. So we want to be very thoughtful about that other piece. It's not a bottomless well. We need to provide the best possible services that we can. We want to be the educational destination for professionals in the region. But that also means, in order to do that, we also need to be willing to make hard choices. And I hope that will be a hallmark of kind of our fiscal leadership as we go forward, is that we're not afraid to make tough choices.
Are we also looking at curriculum and such in the capacity of, I mean, I voted for these math supports, and I believe still that was the right vote because it was COVID and we needed the extra support. But I feel like long-term, what can we do to maybe need less supports and
Sure.
and get our students propped up where they need to be in the first place?
So my
Go-
quick,
you
I
talk
was going to say,
about-
my
talk
quick,
math pilot
yeah, my
after you
quick
do.
comment was going to be, there are, some of it is a bit of a culture shift and contemplating that we want to build capacity, not build jobs. And so to the extent that we can reconsider, or we can look back at the work that we are doing, the work that we've done, the growth that we've had, but also appreciate the attainment of skill sets or capacity to deliver, those don't always need the jobs that drove them to stick around to continue to do them, because we build that capacity in the staff in general. And I'm trying not to be too specific, because it's not too specific, but we did challenge the budget makers when they came to us this first draft to come with all faces and functions being discussed and considered, because there are some there that may not need to be continued for the same purpose that they are, or they have been, and we can repurpose those. Not necessarily looking to get rid of anything or anybody, just repurpose them so that we can tackle some of these new challenges and move ourselves in new directions while maintaining what we've built already.
Thank you.
And if I can just say, I can remember years where the city council voted that we would have a 0% budget increase, and we've managed to make it work. I can't tell you the specifics because I don't remember, and that's when we had 100 people come and speak at our public hearing, when they knew that the budget was going to be cut so drastically. So, you have to deal
Well,
with
we
it.
had that with our last city
Right,
council.
right, exactly.
During COVID.
Yes.
When we needed
Yeah.
support the most.
So, okay, thank you. Any other comments for Nathan? Let's move on to our policy committee. Margot.
Great. A few things. The minutes of our last meeting are on there, and I just wanted to make you aware that, as you know, the policy committee has been spending a lot of time talking about how we review policies and update and then respond in those moments where things that aren't necessarily on the calendar to come up for review because of the timeline, but bubble up for other reasons. How do we do that in an effective and thoughtful way? And so we've been talking about that. One of the things that came up is we do have a lot of policies for a district, and many of which are dated and many of which are optional or specific just to Portsmouth, not ones that the New Hampshire School Board Association would, that they don't even have sample policy. These are just Portsmouth specific. And that is a large chunk of our oldest policies. So the policy committee is going to be doing a major cull, which you will be seeing at the next board meeting, of really taking a hard look at those optional and Portsmouth specific policies to see if they are really serving a need. And we've leaned into the admin and the principals to get the information we need from them on those policies, as well as we'll take a hard look at them, but you should be prepared for a big slate of policies to come, possibly for elimination, that are no longer necessary. Why would you do that as a policy committee? Because the thing about policies is they need to be, compliant with state statute, nimble enough to evolve with the culture without being nailed down to specific language that you have to keep updating them, because that makes the process incredibly inefficient. And you want to be able to respond. And when you're loaded down with 40 policies that are optional or not necessarily up to date, it slows the whole process down. So the hope being I don't want to say cut the dead weight, but we really get down to those policies that are most necessary for us and that everybody understands. Is everybody in the district going to be able to recite 150 policies? No. But if we're all aware of the ones that we have and can be up to date and compliant, great. So that's what's coming down the pipe. And then you'll see, as Zach had presented to this board a while ago, we're really hoping to get to the policy committee is really hoping to get to the point where you'll have a calendar of when policies are up for review, so you'll know well in advance. So if you have specific questions that you want to direct to the committee weeks before the discussion happens, we'll also reach out to all the people that the policy most affects to get our questions answered, so that when we sit down at the table to adjust the policy, we have all the information in that moment and can make the edits and push it forward to the board rather than having to go back and forth until the information is gathered. So that should make the process more timely and effective. So that's that. And then so the first two things that we can consider is we have two policies that are up for elimination. If you read the minutes from the previous meeting, these are up for elimination, not that we aren't going to have them, but that the way they're written is no longer compliant. If you remember, last year we voted on the new sexual harassment policy, which was bringing it up to the new requirements. These reporting forms don't comply with that new policy. As you see in the minutes from our November 1st meeting, the new reporting form is being drafted by the law firm that we're contracting with right now, and it will be compliant with our policy on that. So the first thing we have to consider, or I would like to take a motion for, is the elimination of GBAA-R and JBAA-R.
Move to eliminate.
Second.
Any discussion? Great. Do you take the, yeah. Oh, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great, motion passes. Okay, the next set we'll take individually, and these are all first reading, so you will see these again. So the first policy, ACN, is nursing persons. This is a brand-new policy that just came down. New Hampshire School Board has not had this before, so you'll see the version that we had. We took the language of the New Hampshire School Board, we changed it to work I should say we tweaked those areas that made it more amenable to the way of which Portsmouth does things, and you are seeing that policy in front of you for the first time. When I say made it more amenable, there was things like in the sample policy, the nursing person didn't have to revisit their plan, but periodically, and we changed the language so that plan could evolve as schedule changes and needs changes, things like that, which worked a little bit better to the culture here in Portsmouth. So ACN is up for first read. So does anybody, any questions?
You need a motion.
Oh, yeah. Motion to, motion to approve the first reading of nursing persons accommodations policy ACN.
So moved.
Thank you. Any second?
Second.
That was Hope.
Oh, Hope, okay.
Any discussion or questions? Lisa?
I think I'm trying to, again, not get stuck in the weeds on the language, But reading this for the first time, this strikes me as a policy not unlike the academic integrity policy, where I would personally feel much better approving it knowing how it's going to be received by the people in our buildings who are going to need to have access to lactation spaces in the buildings. And it sounded like Kenny was consulted and thought that we had enough space to accommodate people. But, you know, as a human who has had to plug in hallways and stairwells at fairly unaccommodating employers at various points in my life, I guess I would just like to make sure that we are as protective as possible of our staff, who are predominantly female and many of them of childbearing age, because, you know, it's not an insignificant burden to people to continue working. We have tons of subs and staffing shortages as it is, and we don't want to compound problems unintentionally. So, like, I'm not opposed to this at all, but I guess I would think of it more like I'd love to have that stamp of approval of people who have been having experiences in the buildings feel like this serves them. Because when I initially looked at it and thought we're saying in a lot of places to provide certain things where feasible, and I fully appreciate we need the flexibility because maybe, you know, we have space in one school that's different from another school, but as somebody who's been on the other end of these policies and said, well, where it says when feasible, that means no. And I'm not saying that's what we're saying, but just that
I would make sure we're really clear. We aren't saying it means no.
Right.
And we are setting, it would be really dangerous for a policy to list things and then end up in the situation where you have 10 in one building and 1 in another. So where feasible is that flexible language that we have to have. And in reaching out to the building admin on, you know, just the basics, nuts and bolts, can we do this?
fair.
There was no lack of confidence that we go above and beyond, and we have worked individually with those in need. I think the challenge with this is we can get feedback from those that have used it. It's always hard to predict for those that would want and what they need, and it's constantly changing. So that's why when the committee talked about it, it was important to us that the plan that the nursing person makes with the building administrator has the capacity to be changed. It's not locked in, and that we felt as though was the best way of accommodating the concerns that you're discussing.
Would it be possible, just if we, by the time we bring it back for second reading, maybe to just have a little more sense of how people would receive this in the buildings?
We can try. We historically get very little feedback, and I don't know how we would designate that. Do you? I wouldn't want to
So it's like
single
a
people
survey to the district, people who have utilized, have needed to lactate within our spaces before, what their experience is and whether or not this lives up to what they would want to see. That would be acceptable.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if it needs to be a super formal survey. I mean, we know who's using it right now. But just to have a sense, in the same way, if we're passing a cheating policy, we want to make sure that our principals are going to feel like this matches how we're doing things and how we want to continue doing things.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
So the good, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just, because I want to check back with Kenny, but this didn't, my understanding is this didn't come about because internal concerns expressed that we need policy. This is, we think we've been at least reasonably accommodating to our staff in the past and present. This is now formalizing something that has come down from the state level.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just, because I,
Yep. This isn't like a new approach for
this
us.
isn't a new approach.
Right,
We're
this
just,
is
you
a
think this
bubbling up
reflects what
from
we're already doing.
of staff or.
And it's required.
Yeah, this is a new required policy.
okay.
So, Margot, in section E, line 64,
Correct.
it says, it talks about the 2 weeks, so I guess starts at 63, the 2-week notice. And then in 64, it says this will allow school administrators the opportunity to establish a location and work out scheduling issues. I guess I'm just wondering if this, again, we talk about policy, but then we talk about how it plays out procedurally. So procedurally, whomever is having the discussion about location, to me, that is the perfect opportunity to determine these are my individual needs, therefore, does this location meet my individual needs? So
Right.
I guess that would be more about how it procedurally would play out, Zach. So I don't know if that's enough to cover what Lisa's talking about. Maybe she's not
You're
comfortable with
in
that,
the-
but I'm just wondering, like, procedurally, is there a way to make sure that each building head understands that that dialogue needs to happen?
And it covers a range of things.
Covers individual needs, because different people have different needs
Right.
depending on their situation.
Yep.
And I think, but it will be, that's where you get into feasibility too.
Right.
So we might be able to accommodate a lot of those requests, and I think principals make good faith efforts to try to do that. We won't always be able to accommodate every request. Like I would like privacy is obviously the foremost component. Privacy, and then having a refrigerator of some form or another. Those are like one,
An
two.
outlet is really important.
And an outlet,
because batteries don't
right,
always
and
hold up.
an outlet, right, and I think that's like first and foremost, and then, if I know some of the conversation we've had at some point or another has been around, settings with natural light, settings with whatever. We're not always, just because of the space that we have available to us in buildings, we won't always be able to accommodate that type of request necessarily, but I think there's a good faith effort to try to accommodate as many of those things as possible.
Yeah.
Move the question? Oh.
I'm wondering if on line 55,
Holy.
if,
Yep.
in reference to what both of these women just added, number 4 says, have a minimum of an electrical outlet and a chair. It does say if feasible. I would recommend maybe that's where we remove if feasible, because those do seem like the very minimum requirements, to have a chair and an electrical outlet. And, I think that I don't think that's going to limit us too much, that we can't come up with those two things.
That would address like 90% of my concern.
Could we do that? Could we bring that back? I mean, do that for the second
Bring
read?
it right back. You're on the
Well, I
policy
would have recommended it in the policy committee, but in order to address it here,
We can make it, this
We
is
could-
first read, so
yeah, okay.
we can do anything. Any other comments? So then would somebody you would like to make an amendment to the motion? Is that what you're saying? To remove from line 55, if feasible.
Yes.
Okay?
Second.
Do we need a second to the amendment?
Yep.
No.
Yes, we got one. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Now we need to take a vote
Okay.
On the amendment.
on the amendment first. So the amendment is to strike, if feasible, from line 55. All those in favor? Great, motion passes. Now we need to take a vote on the motion, which has now been amended to pass first reading, ACN having removed if feasible from line 55.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Brian and a second from Hope.
So now it's just the vote. All those in favor? Great, one down, thanks. Second one is alternative learning plans. This is a policy we have had. It is up for, the reason why we have it now as a single reading is it's been a while since we've taken a look at it. Mainly what was changed is it got really wordy, alternative learning plans every time. So obviously we put the acronym in there and tightened it up a little bit. The policy committee felt strongly in the language with regards to how frequently the reporting out happened once the alternative learning plan was in place. So we changed that language to make it more frequent. Other than that, the language has not changed much. It's just updating, general words, small changes to make it read more clearly. And there was new educational references that went in that you're seeing at the bottom that are more applicable, which is why you're seeing that the policy was last updated in 2010. We did check in with those that do work with our students that have alternative learning plans. They have read this. They felt as though it reads clear to the current process that we're following and had no concerns. So I would take a motion for first reading to approve IHBI alternative learning plans.
So moved.
Second.
And Hope. Any discussion? Great. All those in favor? Great, motion passes. Next one is earning of high school credit. As you can see there, that's a New Hampshire School Board required policy. Again, a policy that we have had, just up for updating. When the policy committee took a look at ours, which we had, which was titled Earning of Credit, and then looked at the sample policy from the New Hampshire School Board Association, we felt as though the language that was provided in the New Hampshire School Board Association sample policy was far more clear and better stated than ours. So all of the red reflects incorporating the language from the New Hampshire School Board sample policy into our policy, and then accurately changing the title to, this is actually high school credit that the policy has referred to, which is in the title of the New Hampshire School Board sample policy. So we didn't change the intent or the meaning on the policy we had. We better articulated how it's done, how it's earned, and the processes by taking most of the language from the New Hampshire School Board sample policy. So at this point, I would take a motion for first read to
Move to approve first reading.
Thank you.
Second.
And second is Hope. Any discussion?
Quick question.
Sure.
Does this apply to like dual enrollment and like extended learning opportunities, or is this just if they're in a situation where they need to graduate and we're figuring out or transferring from other schools, or I'm just trying to understand what it applies to?
We have a separate policy for dual enrollment and AP, so to your point, it's more specifically just graduation and credit.
Okay.
Less because there is another policy for that. Yep, which is actually, has been recently updated. And then we took a vote, right?
Nope.
No, okay. And there, any other discussion?
No, you're good.
All those in favor? Great, motion passes. And then finally, IKAA is interdisciplinary credit. This is a recommended policy, again, one that we had needed updating. We really had hoped to take interdisciplinary credit and place it within the earning of high school credit, but while that made logical sense, since you recognize that IK is a required policy, if there was any change that happened to the required policy and we had this section in it, it could confuse things at the end. So we left it separate. We accurately updated the title to high school, and that is the only change that we made. And this is referring just to interdisciplinary credit. So I would love to take a motion for first read for IKAA high school interdisciplinary credit.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Awesome. All those in favor? Great. Motion passes. Thanks, everyone, and get ready for next meeting. It's going to be really. Buckle up. Buckle up. Campers. Just joking. Not looking forward to it at all.
Margot, thank you. Thank you to you. You worked so hard on this as Pip and Liz are on that committee too, so thank you, Paul and Zach, because I know you go to all those meetings too. And Paulette does a great job keeping everything straight, recording it in the book, putting it online, so.
We're moving in the right direction.
We're okay.
Look at all the progress we've made.
Okay, committee updates. Does anyone have a committee update? Anybody go to a meeting? No? Okay. Future agenda requests. If people have requests, please set them to Margot and me, and we'll make sure that
Or
they
we
get.
can make them now.
Oh,
and
okay.
discuss
Okay.
whether it's something. Does anybody have, if you remember, we had discussed several times that if people wanted to make a request, we could make it now and discuss whether there was something that the whole board agreed was something that we wanted to pursue as a request, and then the timeliness of it would be figured out later on. There was concern that people wanted to know what other requests had been made. If you don't have one right now, then yes.
Yeah, think
Just
about it.
email.
Think about it, and, we can do it we'll have it on every agenda, so. Okay.
Nathan?
Oh,
I actually do have something. During my training, all of the student reps on the call said that they do student briefings at their school board meetings. And I talked with the director, and this wouldn't be something that would have to occur every meeting, but maybe once a month. And I don't know if you guys would be interested in this, but it's more of just me getting information from the high school level, the middle school level, and I'm actually planning on going to elementary schools as well and talking to some of their student leaders. But it would be reporting out on student endeavors, whether that's sports or going over student senate meetings, which is just all for, I assume that you guys know that, but all 4 class student councils combined. We've had 2 of those meetings since, so I would love to talk about some of that stuff with you guys during that. But it would probably only be 5-10 minutes and then open to a discussion at the end, but I'm not sure if you guys would be interested in that or not, but.
Yes, our old rep did that, but they didn't go all the way down to middle school and elementary, so I love that you're expanding that idea out. So do you have something you want to tell us now?
I haven't compiled everything
Okay.
together, but
Okay.
yeah.
Just want to give you space if you did.
Oh,
so.
thank you.
Okay, we'll discuss that, but there's a good possibility it can definitely be on the next agenda. And, yeah, okay, Zach and Margot.
Yeah.
Okay. We will have you on the next agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Okay, reopen the public comment. Is anybody here that would like to?
Anyone?
No.
We have one person on Zoom. If I see a hand raised electronically,
No, but Zoom is not allowed.
It's not allowed at this hour?
It's only on the first.
well, we know exactly who she is, and so we wish you a wonderful evening. Get some sleep. Why are you still up at this hour? Member of our faculty.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, we are adjourned, and our next meeting is after Thanksgiving.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, we need a motion.
Don't miss that on Nancy.
I have a rule on that.
Now we have a rule. Okay, do we have a motion
Flexing
to
your
adjourn?
muscle.
So moved.
Second?
Yes.
All right, but before I say all in favor, everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Right.
And our next meeting is after Thanksgiving, which is November
28th. Yeah.
28th.
And leave these out.
Yes,
Take
some of
out.
those, we'll take them, we'll take them.
May
All
I
in
tease?
favor- all
may I
in
tease-
favor?
May I
Wait,
tease
wait.
you about the 28th?
What?
Zach, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
go ahead.
28th, I would tease. I think what we're hoping to do is schedule it at community campus and give you a tour of the demolished space before we start to construct for the Lister Academy. I haven't reached
great.
out yet, but I'm hoping that Mr. Henley and his team will be able to afford us that movie room that we met in once before.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So we'll actually tour and then meet right there on campus.
Oh, good.
So
Okay,
looking for, you'll get that in the announcement, but that's what we're trying to set up.
okay. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Good night, everybody.